Welcome to Sisflix, the podcast where we won't judge you for talking through the movie. Sisflix are the movies you laugh at, yearn for, and overanalyze with your girls, significant others, and now us.
We are your hosts,
Paola
and Nadhya, two sisters and designers who discuss chick flicks we hate to love,
tropes we love to hate,
and all of the aesthetic choices in between. Join us as we break down our favorite movies together. Welcome back to part 2 of our two-part series on Pride and Prejudice, the 2005 movie directed by Joe Wright. If you couldn't get enough of our rambling first half of our take on Pride and Prejudice, do we have a treat for you? We left off at the end of the Netherfield ball, Mr. Collins pursuing Lizzie, Mr. Bingley pursuing Jane, Mr. Darcy being quiet and angry, Mr. Wickham being MIA, and the rest of the Bennets making themselves ridiculous. Tune in as we pick up again on breakfast the next morning with the Bennets at Longbourn.
So next morning after the ball, everyone's at breakfast, everyone's hungover. So like the most bizarre thing is you literally see Mrs. Bennet crack an egg.
A raw
egg into a cup and
of
then
like
just like
milk?
Mix it around and drink that. Like maybe there's some magic cure for a hangover that I'm not interested in trying. I'm not interested in trying that ever. Gross. Every time I see that, I'm like, ugh.
I assume Mary probably doesn't drink very much. She's playing scales in the background, and everyone's like, shut the fuck up.
Everyone's pissed at Mary. From the ball, trying to play, and then again at breakfast, trying to play.
Everyone is so
Poor
fucking
Mary.
hungover.
She's like the emo kid.
She is.
So everyone's hungover, and Mr. Collins walks in with a handful of wildflowers and believes this is the perfect time to propose to Lizzie. He asks everyone to clear the room. And I love this because the dad, when he's like, wait, what? And Mrs. Bennet looks at the dad like, yeah, get up.
Get the fuck
He needs the
out.
room. Gets up begrudgingly and leaves Lizzie and Mr. Collins alone. Lizzie knows what's going down. She's like, do not leave me here by myself. She's like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But the mom forces everyone out of the room. Now it's just her and Mr. Collins. And Mr. Collins starts going off on this spiel that he's obviously practiced for the past 6 hours. Pretty much says this is something that would benefit you. You know, I kind of have to. You come from a humble family, and I think that'll look great working at the church. Like, it's the most bizarre proposal. And Lizzie's like, no. And he takes that and goes, I know you can't say yeah right away, but I know you want to.
It's like Mr. Collins read about women in a book. He learned, oh, women want to be coy. Don't listen to women the first time they tell you no. Keep trying. That's what works. There's a really good nugget of the director's commentary during this scene where, oh God, Joe Wright says, no one actually listens to Mr. Collins. The only one who listens to him is Mary. This is alluded to in the book. It's alluded to in this movie. That Mary is the one who would have been willing to marry Mr. Collins. But because no one's looking at Mary, no one knows that. And so Joe Wright says that Mary's actually in love with Mr. Collins, but he's too stupid to notice.
Well,
So brutal.
actually, their characters would have mixed very well. Like, they're the same person.
A real
they're
missed
completely
opportunity.
unaware. They think they're above everyone else and constantly patronizing.
And he also states that there's something sad about Mr. Collins. There's no goodies or baddies. There's no one in this entire story who's irredeemable. Collins isn't necessarily a villain. He's just a product of this time period, which is why Jane Austen wrote him this way. It's not meant to be like a moral judgment. It's just meant to point out how ridiculous is this. This is so stupid.
Right. The duty behind this proposition of marriage.
Right.
For women, obviously, you know, our main subject, but also for men like Mr. Collins, where he's like, there's this thing I got to do, and you kind of fit the bill.
Like, maybe Mr. Collins would have been gay. You know what I mean? Like, maybe he was ambivalent AF about women.
Just like, he would have been fine living his life. Lizzie says no. And Mr. Collins is like, you don't really mean that. Like, I know you said no, but I think you feel like you want to say yeah.
And I feel like once you think about it and realize how shitty it would be for your family to be kicked out of this home when your dad dies, I think you'll say yes.
And then she's like, no. I meant no. Like, I'm not trying to string you along. Like, he's saying, you know, maybe you're just trying to string me along. Maybe you have to make me work for it. And she's like, no, I really don't want to marry you. And then he gets catty a little bit where he's like, you know, well, no one's really going to propose to you after this. You hold your family's fate in your hands right now, and I'm sure you're going to think about it.
He goes straight to negging. He's like, are you sure about that? Are you sure about that, bitch? Because I'm the only guy here today.
Where's the line? I don't see it.
It's literally like the modern day equivalent of like, hey, yo, damn, girl, you cute. Can I get your number? No. Damn, you ugly then.
You ugly. That's why your breasts stink. Lizzie storms out. Mm-hmm. Mrs. Bennet's losing her shit. She's like, oh my God, Mr. Bennet, come get Lizzie. She won't marry Mr. Collins. Everyone's running around crazy. For the mom, this is like the opportunity of a lifetime. Mm-hmm. For her, Elizabeth's being ungrateful. And it's like, how can you say no to this opportunity
to save us?
Yeah, to secure your family's future. Dad's like, all right, fine, I'll go talk to her. And this is like major dad energy. He goes up to Elizabeth and he's like, what's going on? She's like, I don't want to marry him. The mom's in the background like, if she won't marry him, I'm never going to talk to her. And the dad's like, all right, look, your mom's not going to talk to you if you don't marry this guy. And I'm not going to talk to you if you do marry this guy. I love the dad vibes in here. You see that he's there to back her up. He's like, regardless of what this means for us as a family, I don't want this future of you with this moron. He's an idiot. You absolutely deserve better than this. Mm-hmm. And I will not have you do that because of me. This isn't your problem. You do what's best for you and your future. This is our problem. We'll figure it out. But you're not marrying this asshole.
This is like probably the most fanciful part of this movie. The fact that the dad's like, no, not my daughter. Like, you could totally imagine a similar scenario at the same time. And the dad would have been like, shut the fuck up and marry that guy. God damn. You women talk too much, too many feelings.
Too many ideas. You've been reading too many books.
Burn the books.
So I'm a big fan of Mr. Bennet in this part of the movie.
For sure.
Definitely backs her up. And really just legitimizes her feelings about this man, and she'll never be happy with this type of person, and he knows that, and I think he wants her to be happy. And this is something that he says in the book. He doesn't say it in the movie, but he expresses, I never want to see you in a relationship where you don't respect your partner. Mm-hmm. And I think that's almost a reference to how maybe he feels in his relationship. He doesn't want that for her. She's with her equal.
Or as close to her equal as possible.
Exactly.
Because he also makes it clear that, like, he thinks Elizabeth and Jane are great and the other girls are, like, whatever. One thing that I do like about this interpretation of the story, like this movie, is that the relationship between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, it is seen as, like, Mrs. Bennet is, like, silly, but she's much more sympathetic than she is in the book. Se tienen cariño. You could tell maybe they're not like obsessed with each other. They've been together for like 25 years, but they like each other like enough.
Yeah, that's your partner.
Right. We're in this together. We don't hate each other. This movie makes their relationship seem like something more accessible to how we would maybe perceive our parents or like the boomer generation as parents. It's not necessarily dislike or resignation. It just
is what it is. This is what we got to do.
Right.
You're together for the family.
Right.
You make it work.
Yeah.
So after all of this commotion, all right, Mr. Collins leaves. Elizabeth goes back into the house and she sees that Jane is upset over a letter she just received. Come to find out, Mr. Bingley picked up and left Netherfield. You're led to believe by this letter that was written to her by the sister, Caroline, that he's returned to London to pursue Darcy's sister.
That is heavily implied in the letter. It's not explicitly stated that they're like courting or that there's even any communication between them, but it is very implied. So the point of the letter is to take away Jane's hope that Bingley is interested in her.
She says that without saying it.
This is what happens. You get like this really sad, depressy montage of the staff at Netherfield Hall, like closing up the house. They're doing the fun white sheets over the furniture. You see the Bingleys and Mr. Darcy like in a carriage leaving with like all their luggage and stuff. Bingley looks very sad. Darcy looks very pensive. Caroline Bingley looks very satisfied. You see them leave in this very melancholy fashion. What kind of ends up happening, you go forward into the scene where Elizabeth is packing up for Jane, and through exposition, she's like, you need to go to London, you need to find him, you need to go stay with our aunt and uncle, who have never been mentioned before, in London, and you need to find him and talk to him because he loves you and you love him too, and you guys are supposed to be together, and I don't want to see you giving up when you have a chance to like be with this person. And Jane is like melancholy but very calm, and she's like, Lizzie, like, it's over, you know, like, he doesn't want to see me, like, it's not meant to be. And Lizzie's like, shut up. And she's literally making Jane's maleta, like, she's packing up Jane's shit, and she's like, you are gonna fucking go to London and you're gonna figure this shit out.
And you're gonna bump into him somewhere and you guys are gonna hash this out. I think Lizzie's more about like, you need to be certain, like, figure out what really happened.
And even Lizzie, she can be very shrewd and she can also be very obtuse. And in this moment, she's shrewd, where she's like, his fucking sister is telling you that they left and he's going to court Mr. Darcy's sister. Bullshit. I don't believe that for a second. I bet his sister forced him to leave because she doesn't like it here and she doesn't like, you know, country people or whatever. I bet he's still in love with you. If you find him, you'll figure it all out.
Right.
And Jane is like kind of allowing herself to be discouraged because it's a very discouraging thing. So she's kind of like, no, it's not meant to be. And Elizabeth is just pushing. She's like, no, you got to fucking go. Mandang a Jane. Jane's gone.
So while this is going on, this next scene is like super pretty, where it's Lizzie on the swing outside in her house. She's on the swing and she's just spinning and spinning. Low key makes you dizzy.
It does.
But again, it's the music and it's the shots that do it every time. Next, you see
Charlotte.
Charlotte shows up and Charlotte's like, yo, I have news. And he's like, okay, what's up? Hey, girl. I'm engaged to Mr. Collins. And Lizzie, like, she can't believe it. She's pissed. She's like, what the fuck you mean you're engaged to this guy? Like, he's an idiot.
And Lizzie also has no chill. Like, she does not have a filter for, like, receiving the information and then reacting. She's literally
No, she's the friend that just gives it to you straight. Like, there's no processing.
No. She's literally like, but he's ridiculous.
Yeah, like, the fuck are you thinking?
Yeah, and Charlotte's like, shut the fuck up, Lizzie. Don't you think I fucking know that? Guess what? I'm old as shit, and I needed to get married.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much Charlotte is like, yo, I'm of an age, which is 27 at the time. Apparently, this is old. She's old, doesn't have money, can't get a job.
Yeah.
She's like, at this point, I'm going to just grow old with my parents. At that point, that's the future she sees for herself if she doesn't accept this proposal by Mr. Collins. And I think she even says this, like, I'm not as romantic as you. This is a business proposition.
Charlotte is much more pragmatic than Lizzie. I also think both of the actresses are lovely, but Charlotte as a character is not supposed to be super physically attractive. She's just supposed to be kind of like there. They refer to her as plain, not handsome, whatever. The Bennet girls are supposed to be pretty. Like, maybe Jane is the prettiest, but the five of them are like not bad looking girls. And I think Charlotte does a little bit of comparing herself to Lizzie, where she's like, not only is it I'm not as romantic as you, but it's also you're gonna have options that I don't have.
Right.
I'm not gonna mess around and like wait any longer. You know, I'm almost fucking 30. I need to get my shit together, get the fuck out of my parents' house.
And I think that she turns around and leaves. Elizabeth kind of has to sit with that. You kind of see her process that. And I wonder like what her thought process is through this. In the book, she's annoyed. She puts her friend up in a pedestal and wonders, like, how can she bring herself down to this fucking guy's level? She has to kind of sit with those feelings for a little bit and understand that not everyone's gotta have
this great love.
And for Elizabeth, she makes it very clear, like, for her, it's a great love or it's nothing. And she's fine with it being nothing. Not everyone's okay with that.
Not everyone's okay with that. And I'm pretty sure Charlotte is the oldest of her sisters. So that's another added pressure that maybe like Jane has and Elizabeth doesn't. You know, Elizabeth fancies herself as being very shrewd and very mature. And I think she perceives herself to be, you know, another person kind of in a different way than Mary, who's like, I know what the fuck is up. Don't come to me with this bullshit. Like, don't marry somebody that you don't fucking like. Like, what are you doing? It's her immaturity showing. It's like she's 20. She wants the big romance because she hasn't reached the point where Charlotte's at, where you start to get afraid. Where am I going? What am I doing with my life? Am I ever going to have kids? Am I ever going to get married? Your parents get older, and if they die, then fucking what? You know, as a woman at this point in time. In the book, you know, from Jane Austen's perspective, I guess, Charlotte is like that representation of women who just need to be like, all right, get on with it.
Also, as the author, Jane Austen is also giving you a different take on feminism, which is just being okay with women's choices regardless of what that is. Right?
Let women just choose things.
If this is what she's comfortable with, that's what she's comfortable with. This is how she wants to lead her life. That's her choice. The point is, she can make that choice for herself. Maybe Charlotte felt like she had no choice, obviously, so that's why she decided to do this. But I think that's the comparison between Lizzie and Charlotte. Like, you see that there's these women and how they take control of their life. Like, how they choose to have the little power that they have at this time and how they wield it to control what they can. Anywho, after that, you get the sense that time goes by through this, like, beautiful spinning that Lizzie does.
Lizzie's spinning on the swing, and each time she spins, it's like a new season. It's sunny and beautiful like summer, and then it's rainy and snowy like winter, and then it's like the birds are chirping and more flowers are blooming, and you are aware that it's spring and that a significant amount of time has passed. It's giving Bella Swan in Twilight when Edward leaves, and all of the, like, you keep turning the pages in the book and it's like December, January, March, like nothing fucking happens in her life.
Right.
That's the sense that you get from this scene, which is really nice. And you hear in voiceover that Elizabeth is answering a letter to Charlotte, where Charlotte has ostensibly invited her to visit and come and stay with her at her new home. So by this point, Charlotte is like fully settled, fully married. And Elizabeth is responding to this letter, and she's saying, yes, of course I'll come visit. I can't wait to see you. I'll be there soon. As this voiceover is happening, you see a carriage pulling up to this like lovely little kind of cottage, and Charlotte runs outside. She and Elizabeth hug. It's like a really sweet reunion, and it's also kind of like a bury the hatchet. You're not going to judge me anymore. You're not going to bring up this fucking person I married and that he's a doofus.
Lizzie arrives and she sees Charlotte happy. Like, she kind of sees her content. She sees her in her home. She sees her the lady of her house. You kind of feel better for Charlotte. As the viewer, I'm with Lizzie. I'm like, the fuck?
What are you doing?
Then you see Charlotte. She's running her house. You're kind of like, oh, okay. All right, I see. You know, she even says, like, it's such a joy to run my own home. She's out of her parents' house. She's making the rules in her space now. I love that you start to see Charlotte kind of in control in her relationship as well. They're walking Lizzie through the house, and I love it when Mr. Collins is talking about his garden, and he's like, oh, my wife says, you know, I should spend lots of time in the garden. And then as he's saying that, they're walking into like their sitting room, and she just shuts the door and then says, you know, this is my private parlor. And you see right there in that moment, she's the one directing their relationship. She's the one calling the shots. In her way, pushes Mr. Collins to do what she needs him to do for her to have her space and do her thing.
Oh, yeah. She does have a little bit more control, which is really cool. There are a couple moments between her and Mr. Collins where she's like, shh, wait. Mm-hmm. And she'll like correct something that he says or something like that. And you could tell that she kind of relishes it. She enjoys that she is in a position of like more control.
I think it's here. There's little things that Charlotte says where you start seeing that she has picked up some of Mr. Collins' sayings or like mannerisms or something, you're like, oh no, they're blending.
They've become one. And there are a couple of really funny lines where Mr. Collins is basically like, any woman would be happy to live here, within earshot of Elizabeth.
Yes, he does.
And Elizabeth's like, well, I don't fucking care. The little things that Charlotte says, it does get really funny because Mr. Collins made a big point referring to his patroness, the person who owns the estate on which he serves as a clergyman. The estate is called Rosings Park, and her name is Catherine de Bourgh. Apparently there were only like 15 or 20 people in England at the time that this was written, because Catherine de Bourgh is also related to Mr. Darcy. She is his aunt. Because she's his aunt, she's also kind of become aware of Elizabeth. She's heard about these like Bennet girls because her nephew was in the country like for the summer, and word travels, I guess. After Elizabeth arrives, they're invited over to Rosings Park for like dinner at the big house. Where Mr. Collins says something very Mr. Collins-y that you expect, where he's just like, Lady Catherine de Bourgh doesn't care if you're humble. She just will appreciate that you're there. And it's like, shut up. Charlotte's like, don't worry, just wear whatever's best.
Almost saying like you weren't prepared to be dressed up. Then Mr. Collins jumps in and is like, you know, she's not avert to the extremely humble or some shit like that. Like, oh my God. And you can see it in Elizabeth's face, like, these bitches.
She does pick up so many of his mannerisms, and it never becomes more apparent than when they arrive at Rosings Park. Like, they arrive at the big house on the estate. They're getting ready to introduce Lizzie to Lady Catherine de Bourgh, this, like, big fancy lady. And Charlotte is wearing this dumb-ass fucking feather on her head. She's looking crazy. Like, it's not a look at all. She absolutely looks like a person trying to look rich.
No, 100%. Le queda mal. Like,
Yeah.
it's so out of place. It looks ridiculous.
It looks so bad.
So, Rosing's house. This house, you can actually visit Rosing's house. It's actually called the Burghley House.
Okay.
And it was built during Queen Elizabeth's the first time.
Oh, so in the 1560s?
It was built in 1555.
Good Lord. Well, that's technically Mary, Queen Mary, but that's all right. I'll forgive you.
Well, no, the build started in 1555 and it
it.
took 32 years to finish it.
Good God.
Yes. So by the time it was done, you're in the Elizabethan era.
Elizabethan.
Elizabethan.
The bridge to Elizabethia.
Elizabethan. Elizabethan?
Elizabethan.
Elizabethan.
Oh, it's like Toyotathon, but it's Elizabethan.
By the time the house was done being built, it was in the Elizabethan.
Elizabethan?
The Elizabethanian times.
The Toyotathon, Elizabethan. Happy Honda days.
And this house is such a drastic shift. I think to show position, it's almost dark.
It's very dark.
It's dark and almost gothic.
So moody.
It's very moody. The whole home is done in the Baroque style, which was way before Regency era. It's like dark and heavy and ornate. And you see that a lot in this home. So you're getting status. You get status. You get time. This
old money.
Old money. That's the impression you get from this home.
And I want to call out from the director's commentary. He says that when they did the dinner scene, which is coming, they're arriving for this dinner. This was the first day of filming.
Oh, ever.
It was his first feature film, first day of filming, and Dame Judi Dench is playing Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and she is like a legendary actress, like British actress. I mean, she also looks fucking incredible. Like, the way they like shoot her the whole time, she's so fucking stately. She's such a snob. Oh man, she's great. He mentions that, like, to quote, also because the walls are all painted and very precious, obviously, we couldn't attach anything to the walls, so it was a nightmare to light. They had a really difficult time lighting because usually if you're on a set, especially if you're on like a set that's built for what you're shooting, you don't have to worry about fucking nailing shit into the wall, putting up lights, doing like gaffing and all of that jazz. Especially when you're constrained by like a previously built environment. Not only do you have to worry about like you don't want to damage anything, all of these walls are covered in this gorgeous like art. Everything's painted top to bottom with these incredible scenes. You also don't want to bring anything in that doesn't fit. You can't bring a huge lighting apparatus because you're not going to be able to get it into the room, and then you're not going to be able to get it out. So, I mean, I think the scene is beautiful. I think you could literally just take screenshots of all of these scenes back to back and they look like paintings. They're composed so well, but the majority of it is lit with candles and everyone's glowing and it's beautiful.
You talking about that, there's this one cut or like one take where all the men are standing in the room.
I'm looking at that picture literally right now.
And it literally looks like a painting. It really does. Like, and I think he does that throughout the movie. In Netherfields, when they're all in the drawing room and they're talking, like he takes these moments. That's what he does. Just lingers on a shot where there's like not much going on. Maybe there's like conversation, but like everybody's kind of in the same position for an extended 2 or 3 seconds. Each individual one of those scenes can be a painting.
I guess it surprises me. I shouldn't say so young. So he's 30.
He was 30 when he did this. He's not 30 now.
No, yes, he was 30 at the time. I feel simultaneously 100 years old and 13 years old. Every single day. A little bit of both. And so it shocks me that like he has such a great understanding of, not shocks me, that's not really what I mean to say. To be a filmmaker, I think you have to have these things, but he has such a great understanding of composition and also like literally the art of the time. Like everything has such a specific artistic interpretation. It feels so like cohesive and it's really, really fun to watch. So we get into Rosings Park. Charlotte's wearing that fuck-ass feather on top of her head. She looks ridiculous.
Parece un pajarito.
Un pajarito. They meet Lady Catherine, who, again, Lady Catherine's like stately, a big snob. Even the way her hair is done and like the couch that she's sitting on. And she doesn't turn to look at them. They have to come around the couch for her to like lay her eyes on them, which beautiful touch. I love that. She's just judging. She's judging. They go to say hi. Everyone is introduced. Lady Catherine is immediately like the most arrogant person on earth. And you can kind of understand why Mr. Collins is the way he is if he spends so much time with her.
Like you right away catch the up and down look.
I think Lady Catherine is doing that meme math where it's like she's calculating all the shapes and shit, where she's like, I've heard this about you, but now I'm looking at you and I don't know. And does it line up? Is it real? Elizabeth, I think, is wearing like a dark green dress, and she's absolutely the most underdressed person in the room, 110%. But she doesn't carry herself like she is, which I think is important. As they're kind of at the midst of like having a little bit of conversation with Lady Catherine, Elizabeth turns around and in a jump scare, Mr. Darcy's behind her.
No, she doesn't turn around and he's behind her. She like looks to the side. He's like off to the side of the room.
Just watching.
Just watching.
Just fucking lurking. And he's just there, silent. And she's like, and she is shocked. And she kind of out loud is like, Mr. Darcy, what the hell? What are you doing here? He's like, I'm visiting my aunt. That's why I'm here. You know, I have more reason to be here than you do. It's fucking weird that you're here. I guess all 20 people in England were busy today. And that's when Lady Catherine is like, wait, you know each other? Because everything that she's heard about Lizzie is from Mr. Collins.
Yeah.
That's where you kind of figure that out.
How do you know my nephew?
Right. She's like, how do you know my nephew? Where did you guys meet? And it's like, we met when he was staying in Hertfordshire. And she's like, oh. Then she's doing a little bit more three-dimensional math after she learns this information. So they sit down to dinner. It's laid out beautifully. Joe Wright, throughout his director's commentary, mentions how much he hates filming dinner parties because they can be very hard to like choose who you want to focus on rather than needing to focus on the entirety of the table. He does a great job of it. So they're at this dinner party. Charlotte and Mr. Collins are sitting next to each other. Lady Catherine is at the head of the table and she goes, Mr. Collins, you and your wife can't sit next to each other. I don't know if that's a rule. That sounds pretty stupid. And she goes, move, and indicates that he and Lizzie should switch places. Yeah, so who was sitting next to Mr. Collins? Mr. Darcy. So Lizzie and Mr. Collins switch places. Now she's sitting next to Mr. Darcy. Now she's mad. Everyone's mad. This is the most awkward dinner ever.
So according to Reddit, at the time, it was proper etiquette that you sit across from your partner not directly next to your partner.
Oh, because everybody thought you would try to bone under the table?
It's typical to make conversation with the people sitting next to you.
Oh, and because you know your partner, you should sit next to someone you don't know. Wow. They really loved making people be extroverts. Great. Lizzie sitting next to Mr. Darcy. They're going through their first course, which happens to be like soup. Lady Catherine takes this moment to literally grill Elizabeth. What's your full government name? Who are all your family members? Who are your fucking enemies? Are you high right now? Do you ever get nervous? Like, she's asking her every fucking question. She's just like, how many sisters do you have? You know, I have 4. Like, I'm one of 5. And she's like, 5 sisters? My God, that's ridiculous. And Lizzie's like, okay. You can tell as the scene goes on, all this bitch wants to do is eat her fucking soup. She's like, can you stop asking me questions so I can eat this goddamn soup? Nope. And she keeps asking. She's like, you have this many sisters. Well, how old are all of your sisters? Oh, well, my youngest sister's 15. Oh, my goodness. But you're all out in society? Yes, we're all out in society. That's crazy. Before the oldest sister's married, you're all out in society? And then Elizabeth has this line where she's kind of like, I don't think we would have a very good relationship with our younger sisters if they weren't allowed to have any fun because the older sisters aren't married. Lady Catherine's like, you really speak your mind, even though you're so young. Like, how old are you? And Elizabeth takes this moment to kind of be a jerk. And she's like, well, all of my sisters are out in society. I'm not going to tell you how old I am.
Right. She takes the opportunity to not answer this question.
Yes.
And proceeds to eat her soup.
Because she is like, let me fucking eat. Have you seen me? I haven't eaten in days. In this line of questioning, Lady Catherine is also like, what about your governess? Like, she asks questions about a governess. And Lizzie's like, well, we didn't have a governess growing up. And Lady Catherine's like, what? And it's like, she finds this like so offensive. She's like, how are you supposed to learn anything? How are you supposed to do anything? She's like, well, you know, my mother like taught us at home. And she's like, oh, that's very unusual. You could tell she's like very disapproving of this whole situation.
I think she's trying to get like a take on like, where does she fit in society?
Is she fancy? Is she not fancy?
How acceptable is your family? Exactly. Are you educated? Do you play the pianoforte?
Oh, yeah. She's like, she starts asking her this list of accomplishments that we heard, you know, in the beginning of the movie, right? Do you play instruments? Do you draw? Do you sing? Do you do all of these other things? And the majority of those things, Lizzie's like, no. And she's like, well, do your sisters like play, sing, draw? And Lizzie's like, no, not really. And she's like, what? She's so taken aback by the fact that these girls are like, I don't know, not a fucking one-man show of female accomplishment. Finally, she starts to fuck up and Lizzie gets to eat her goddamn soup. We cut forward. We finish with dinner. Everybody has moved the party over to the sitting room. They're in the sitting room, kind of sitting around chatting. Lady Catherine is like the puppet master of this show, right? Like, she is pulling everybody's strings. Everyone does whatever she says. So she's like, Miss Bennet, like, do you play pianoforte? And Elizabeth's like, no, like, I'm not very good at it. I don't practice. And Lady Catherine's like, music is very important. If I had learned to play, mind you, she's like an old woman with infinite money and God knows how much time on her hands. And she's like, if I had learned to play, I would have been incredible. Okay. All this time, a todo esto, Lady Catherine has a daughter whose name is Anne. Anne looks goth, sickly, tired, like a female Timothy Chalamet. And so Lady Catherine is like, Anne would have learned too if she had been in good health. But apparently she's tired and pale, so that means that her health is shitty.
No, and like my thing is, like, watching this scene here, it's like all the shit that the Bennet girls, specifically Elizabeth, has been getting from this people in this society, right? From people at this, from Darcy, from Caroline, and now from Catherine de Bourgh. All this shit about being accomplished and, you know, do you play this or do you draw and blah, blah, blah. And she's literally confessing that she herself doesn't play an instrument. Her daughter doesn't play an instrument.
They don't have to be good. They can just be rich.
Because they're rich, exactly.
If you're not a man, may as well be rich. And then you'll be good. And that's really what we're learning. Like, for Lady Catherine and her daughter, it's basically like, well, we don't have to try because we have money. You, though? You gotta try, bitch.
You need to try.
It's Brittany. You better work, bitch. You better try. So Lizzie says openly, she's like, I'm not good at playing piano.
Well, she asks her to play the piano.
Yeah, she asks her, and Lizzie's like, no, I'm not good at it. And she's like, play. Like, she's literally so confused. She's like, why are you saying no? Fucking play. And Lizzie's like, okay. And Mr. Collins is behind her, giving her the eyes of like, go, just do it. No one says no to Lady Catherine.
She asks you to do it. Do it.
Lizzie goes, sits down at the pianoforte, plays quite poorly. Not great. And as she's playing, Lady Catherine, turns to Mr. Darcy and she's like, Georgiana, who is Mr. Darcy's younger sister, who's probably the same age as Elizabeth's youngest sister, so 15, 16. She's like, how's Georgiana getting along, like, on the piano? And Mr. Darcy's like, oh, very well. She's very good at it. And it's, like, her passion. And Elizabeth's, like, just kind of listening, overhearing what's happening. Another visitor who has kind of been at this house the whole time but hasn't quite played into the plot yet is Mr. Darcy's cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam. So he's in the military. He's also a nephew of Lady Catherine. They're around the same age. And he comes over to where Elizabeth is playing piano. He's making small talk. He's like a pleasant seeming guy. So he's like, hey, so, what was my friend like my cousin, when he was out in Hertfordshire? She goes for the drama. And she's like, ugh, you don't even want me to tell you. It'll be such a terrible tale. He was so quiet and awful. Didn't talk to anyone. Wouldn't dance. By that point that she's like, saying all of this, Mr. Darcy himself has come over to the piano where she's playing, and he's like, now he's kind of like nervous because he's hearing her describe him to someone else. He's like, I didn't know anyone. Like, what do you mean I didn't want to dance or talk to anybody? I didn't fucking know anybody. Like, I don't want to talk to people. And she was like, oh yeah, you know how you never meet anybody when you're at a ball? You know how you never meet people, like, when you're out in like an assembly filled with fucking people? He like lowers his voice. Colonel Fitzwilliam steps away from the piano, so it's just the two of them. And he's like, I'm not gonna quote this directly, but like, I'm not good at talking to strangers. Like, which is a very vulnerable admission from this like big great man. He's like, I'm not good at talking to strangers, and I don't like to do it. And she's like kind of back to teasing him. And is like, well, you should just listen to your aunt's advice, right? Because his aunt's telling everybody what to fucking do. Listen to your aunt's advice, and you should just practice talking to strangers.
I love this because you see Darcy be vulnerable for a second. You finally understand. You're like, oh, he's just an introvert. Like, this whole time he comes off as an asshole, and he's just like shy. And when you realize that, you're like, oh, Mr. Darcy. You know what I also love about this scene here? So once she's like, you should follow your aunt's advice and practice. Try to talk to more people and you'll get more comfortable. She turns around and goes right back to playing the piano. For a minute, he kind of just stands there and looks at her. And then if you're paying attention, you see that Charlotte's in the background. And she's peeping this. She's watching. She's watching everything go down, and she sees like how he kind of just stands there looking at her while she's not looking. You're starting to realize he's falling in love with her.
Yo, low-key, Charlotte knows what the fuck is up this entire time. At the beginning, Charlotte's like, Jane needs to act fast with Bingley. Like, she needs to go in there. She needs to tell him she likes him, and they need to get married ASAP. And obviously, Bingley has left Netherfield. He left Hertfordshire. Jane never really did that. Jane was like too reserved and too calm. Then the thing with Mr. Collins, she was like, you know what? You don't want this guy? I'm gonna take him because I need that thing that you don't think you need. Security. Gets Mr. Collins. Now she's peeping Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth. Elizabeth is like not even terribly engaged anymore, right? Like, they have this conversation. She goes back to playing the piano and she's just like, whatever, I'm not gonna pay attention to you. Darcy's standing there just watching her. And the only person who notices is Charlotte. She's got eyes.
At this point, you already know he likes Lizzie, but you're still not sure like how much.
Or why even.
In the movie, right? Mm-hmm. If you're reading the book at this point, you already understand that he's kind of been there for a while. But as the viewer of this particular adaptation, you're kind of like, okay, he's into her, but where is this going? surprise, right? Because we're gonna all be surprised.
Oh yeah, we've never heard this story before. I think another thing that I really like about this particular adaptation against the previous adaptation, but also to a certain extent like against the book, is that I think Darcy was intended to be seen as like incredibly arrogant. Like he's like mean, purposefully mean, because he knows that he has this place in society, he has this status and this amount of money, and he can just be mean to people and like nothing happens. In this version, a thing that I think is like so much more relatable than that is that Mr. Darcy is just shy as fuck. Just shy.
And I think Matthew Macfadyen does such a good job of playing him almost like the strong, silent, shy type.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he'll do the stuff, right? Like, he'll get it done. But he doesn't want to talk to anybody while he's doing it. And he doesn't want to dance or, like, hang out. Like, he's got a puzzle. He's got some hot chocolate. He wants to go home. And I think up until this point in the movie, like, we really haven't seen him be even especially happy. Like, he's so reserved. It's either he's reserved, annoyed, or silent and observing what's happening in the corner. You don't get more from him than that.
And I think this is one of the first times you kind of see him open up a little bit. Aside from the dance is point one where you start seeing him open up in an angry way, though. Like
he's frustrated.
Opening up as in communicating more than the more surface.
Yeah.
He's getting underneath the surface there. You start kind of seeing like, here's a nerve and we've touched it. In this scene, you kind of see a bit more of that vulnerability, maybe, where you're understanding his reservations, why he's been so reserved up until this point. And Elizabeth, I don't know if she catches that yet. I don't think she does.
She's oblivious. After this part, Elizabeth at one point is alone in Charlotte's house because Charlotte and Mr. Collins have like gone into the village. And Darcy just kind of like shows up, walks in. He seems super flustered.
He literally just walks into the house.
Which is so weird because you're like, he would knock. Like, what? He just walks into their house.
The servant wasn't there to open the door?
And Elizabeth is there alone. And she's like, oh, she's super caught off guard. And she's like, what's up? Why are you here? And he's like, this house is so lovely, isn't it? And she's like, yeah, I'll tell Mr. Collins that. Like, this isn't my fucking house. And he's like, yeah, cool. Like, you guys, I feel like you can like
see you're nervous for him. He doesn't know what to say. He kind of just shows up on a whim.
He's struggling so hard.
And now he's there and he's like, what the fuck? Why am I here? What was I gonna say? And she asks him to sit down. As the viewer, you're like, oh shit, like, okay, maybe he's gonna tell her, maybe he's gonna talk to her, No, he just bows and leaves. Did all of it and nothing at the same time.
He says absolutely nothing of value. He just says nothing. Elizabeth's like, well, do you want to sit? And he's like, no, it's fine. Like, I'll just go. And she's like, okay.
I just gotta go.
Right. And she's like, why did you come here? You've been here for 70 seconds. Like, what are you doing? And he's just like, all right, anyway, bye. And he like runs at like a 6'2" man running out of this house, crosses paths with Charlotte and Mr. Collins. Like, he is so flustered, which he never is, and greets them briefly, leaves the house. And Charlotte is like, Lizzie, what did you do to him? And Lizzie's like, I have no idea. I don't know why he's fucking acting like this. Charlotte, the gears are turning.
Charlotte knows.
Yeah, she knows.
Charlotte's purpose of asking, like, you see the effect you have on this guy.
Yeah.
Dude, you see what you're doing? Like, you don't see? Mira como tú lo pusiste al pobre.
Yeah.
And Lizzie's like, what? I don't know what happened. Oh, well. And continues to go about her life.
Chilling. Then we're going to kind of fast forward a little bit to a scene where they're at church. Of course, it's a Sunday. Mr. Collins is a clergyman, so he is preaching. He does a very good job of seeming very awkward and uncomfortable. Mrs. Collins, Charlotte, is looking up at him with like these like love eyes, which is actually kind of sweet. The camera pans over to where Elizabeth is sitting. She's sitting next to Colonel Fitzwilliam because they're friendly. In the movie, they're just kind of like, oh, acquaintances. In the book, they become buddies. Like, they become like tight.
They take walks together.
Yeah, they hang out.
In the book, you definitely get the sense that they might court.
They could like each other.
And it's actually in the book, he actually makes it pretty clear that He would maybe consider her if he didn't need to marry for money.
Yes. He makes it clear at one point that he needs to marry for money. And then to both of them, that's kind of like the, oh, yeah, okay. And then that diffuses any romantic tension. Like after that, they're both kind of like, all right, whatever. We're just buds.
Because she does not, obviously. She can't provide him with the financial security that he needs to marry into.
Exactly.
Drawing light again into the business proposition that marriage was at that time.
Another thing that's made clear in the book, but not necessarily the movie, right, is like Colonel Fitzwilliam is Darcy's cousin, but he's also a second son. Like he's not the eldest. So he doesn't inherit whatever nobility or income or estate or whatever that his older brother has inherited already, will inherit, and that's why he's in this position where he's like, well, I went into the military, that became my job, and now I need to marry someone rich. We're kind of in the same place. Isn't that funny? Ha ha ha. But at least I'm not a woman. I like Colonel Fitzwilliam. I wish they had featured him a little bit more in the movie because I think the actor that played him seemed like he could have been kind of funny. But they're at church. Lizzie's sitting next to Colonel Fitzwilliam. This sermon is so fucking boring. There are people that are like falling asleep in the pews. Like it's very funny. They're chatting very, very quietly. And she kind of asks a question about Mr. Darcy's like character. Fitzwilliam is like, oh, Mr. Darcy's the best. He's like a really good friend. He's like a great person and so loyal. Everyone loves him. And she's like, what? This is so fucking weird. He's like, yeah, you know, recently he saved one of his friends from like a bad marriage. And Lizzie's like, and her ears go up and she's like, what? And he's like,
which friend?
Yeah, which friend? What do you mean? He's like, you know, his friend Charles Bingley, like his really close friend. It immediately clicks and she's like, oh my God. And she tries to keep it cool and she's like, why did he separate them? And he's like, oh, well, it would have been a really imprudent marriage. There were strong objections to like her family. Lizzie is absolutely crushed. Like her eyes start to tear up. Peak acting from Keira Knightley right here. She keeps it together. Cut to the next scene, you get this like big wide nature shot. It is pouring fucking cats and dogs. It's raining so hard. You see this figure running across like a footbridge over a river and ending up underneath this big old building that has like an awning that you can like go and dry off under. We find out that this figure running is Elizabeth Bennet. She's gotten caught in the rain. She's soaked to the fucking bone, okay? Like she could have taken a dip in a lake. She's just run. So she's trying to catch her breath as she's like standing, you know, near a column under this awning. She's there for maybe 15, 20 seconds. And then she turns around. Jump scare again. Mr. Darcy's there.
How he got there, we don't know.
Did he run? No one knows.
He was running after her, but nobody noticed.
He's equally as wet. They've both swum in the same lake. Basically, Darcy has shown up to propose to Elizabeth after how incredibly weird he's been. She has no indication that he has these feelings for her. In the book, she's less confused. She's more frustrated than she is confused in the book. But in the movie, it is like night and day. Like she has no fucking idea why he's asking her to marry him at all.
Well, no. And it starts as a rant.
Yes.
She turns around, sees him, and is like, oh shit, I didn't know you were there. And like, he starts off right out of there. The gate. Like, I can't hold this in anymore. I need to tell you how much I love you.
His thread has snapped.
And then you're like, oh shit, what? As the viewer, you're watching this for the first time. You're like, what the? You're reacting the way she's reacting. You're like, what? Like, my man, what are you saying? He just continues on.
He like cannot stop himself. It's like started and he can't stop.
Yes, it is word vomit. He's essentially saying like, look, you're way beneath me. This wouldn't be convenient for me, but I just can't help myself. I just love you so much. I can't take it anymore. I need you to be my wife. Only after he's said that she's inadequate.
Wild.
Pretty much just in maybe 3 sentences tells her how much he loves her and admires her, while also telling her she's beneath him and her family will not do.
Oh yeah, brutal.
When she hears this, she's like, I'm going to refuse you, but not for the reasons that you think.
Yeah.
I'm going to refuse you, and it's not just because you clearly insulted me while you were trying to tell me that you love me, but also because you've been an asshole in the situation between my sister and Mr. Bingley. I found out that you're the reason that they're not together today. What makes you think that I would ever accept you as a husband?
Not only have you insulted the fuck out of my family in this little speech where you thought you were proposing to me, but you've maybe ruined my sister's life. Like, she even asks him, like, can you fucking explain yourself? Do you have any reasons? And he's pretty much like, no, I don't think what I did was wrong. Full stop, unapologetic. I don't think what I did was wrong.
Yeah, I was looking after my friend.
Yeah, I thought I was doing what was best for my friend. And she's like, well, you fucking weren't, because my sister was in love with him. And he's like, no, she wasn't. Like, she was super reserved. She never seemed to have strong feelings. And she was like, that's because she's shy. And he's like, Bingley's shy and modest too. He's shy, and you could tell from a distance that he really liked her. And she's like, my sister doesn't even reveal her true feelings to me. They've reached kind of like a fever pitch in that moment. And then they both kind of have to come down. You could see them both take a beat. Darcy's surprised by how frustrated she is and by the fact that he miscalculated this so badly. And Elizabeth is like, I need to fucking calm down because I'm going to murder this man with my bare hands. So she's like, deep breath.
They take a breath.
Yes.
He's kind of trying not to redeem himself, but he's trying to kind of explain himself in the most arrogant way possible to her as to why he did what he did. Mm-hmm. And then she's like, well, whatever, but how about how you treated my dear friend, Mr. Wickham? And I think this is where she lost him. Mentioned this fucking guy, and he was like, bitch, what?
His whole face changes. He's like, Mr. Wickham? Bitch. Okay.
Like, he said it out of his neck.
He really did. He was like, ooh, okay, no, let's spar. Let's tangle.
Mr. Wickham.
Yes. I'm looking at the director's commentary. Listen, I love this commentary. Over the scene of this proposal, Joe Wright says, he lets that whole speech out. He's prepared all of it, but wasn't prepared to say, I love you. He'd written it down and he'd thought about it and he'd rehearsed it, which is why he rushes through it, then surprises himself by saying, I love you. It didn't occur to him, but he can't help but tell her. It's so good. It happened so fast and so quickly, and afterwards you can't quite remember what happened or what you said. You just know something terrible happened, which is also why it's done at such speed. Continuing with the director's commentary, Joe Wright says, I like the way when she brings up Mr. Wickham. Jealousy is a thing that brings Darcy forward. At this point, they've had like a respectable distance between them, I think. Now Darcy's mad, and he steps towards her, and they are less than a foot apart. They're like breathing each other's air. They have this moment where they're like a foot apart from each other. They're angry. He's pissed about Mr. Wickham. She's pissed about this entire situation. They're kind of swaying towards each other, but Darcy's pretty much like, all right, so this is how you see me. This is what you think of me. Okay. Maybe if you weren't embarrassed by all of the things that I said, you wouldn't have denied me like this. And she's like, maybe if you were actually a fucking gentleman and didn't insult the shit out of me for the last like 5 minutes, but I would never marry you.
Yes. Like, I just think about having to get through these lines, especially for Kiera, because her rejection of him, she does it in one breath.
Mm-hmm. She's pissed.
I mean, I admire her just for this line. Like, her whole career, just for this line in one breath, like, sends me every time.
Oh, you're the last man in the world that could ever be prevailed upon to marry. Incredible. And that shuts Mr. Darcy up. Like, you can tell that whatever jealousy or anger he was just experiencing has now just, like, turned into pain. She says, I'm never going to marry you. And she's heavy breathing. Even she's surprised by what she's said, and I think how much force with which she has said it.
Yes.
Darcy's eyes go soft. He's hurting. He looks at her for like a second, for one, like a split second, maybe inclines his head towards her again and turns around and leaves.
I'm watching this for the first time, and I'm like, oh, he's going to kiss her.
They're going to kiss. They're going to kiss.
It's the most frustrating almost kiss.
Oh, it's great.
In a movie.
They do it so well.
Because, again, yes, they're 6 inches away from each other. And she's pissed. But, girl, I'll put money down. If he didn't go in and kiss her, she would have kissed him back. 100,000%.
Absolutely. So, in the director's commentary, he says, when they almost kissed was something that we actually talked about in the screen test that we did with Matthew. Basically, Lizzie and Darcy really, really fancy each other.
There's the tension. There's heat in the scene. And had one of them like leaned in a bit, like anything, they would have been down.
Darcy turns around. He's out of there. And Lizzie just leans back against this column. She is catching her breath. She has no fucking idea what just happened. We see her, what we assume is the next day, and she is in the Collins home, and she is just morose. Like, she's in terrible shape. She looks like sick Jane at Netherfield. Her hair's not done. She's not wearing any real dresses. She's wearing like a dressing gown. She's just standing around. She tries to read a book. She's too frustrated. She puts it down. She does a fun thing in movies. I don't know why we do this, but she does a really fun thing where she just stares in the mirror for 12 hours. Just looking in the mirror.
I think I was always confused about this scene and what it was supposed to mean. I saw the movie first before reading the book.
Yeah.
And I think once I read the book, I think it's supposed to represent her dialogue to herself in the book, where she's pissed, she's frustrated, she's thinking about Jane, she's thinking about her, she's thinking about the nerve of this guy to think that she would accept a proposal from him.
But she's also thinking about, oh fuck, my family's worse than I thought.
I think she has to come to terms with how they come off to other people. It's terrible.
And I think that realization is almost worse than whatever anger she's feeling, because she's just like, shit, Jane could have been happy. Her anger is more for Jane, right? Jane could have been happy, and my family really fucking fucked this up, right? From the director's commentary, in the mirror scene, he says, this whole section is about seeing yourself for the first time.
Ah, I like that.
So here she's coming to look at herself, reconsider everything she thought, or the preconceived ideas she had. And she's looking right in the lens. There's actually no mirror at all. She's looking through the flat directly at camera, which is her looking at us. We are her.
This is where, in the book, she actually goes for a walk, because this is the next day. She's still pissed. She goes out for a walk, and she actually happens to fall upon Mr. Darcy, and he gives her a letter.
Yes.
Right. And this is the letter where he's explaining his why he did what he did for Mr. Bingley. And he goes on to explain the situation with Wickham. In the movie, they take this opportunity where she seems to be reflecting on herself or on her decision or on everything that happened earlier that day or the previous day. And they choose this scene where he walks into the house in the middle of the night and drops off the letter in her room while she's in her nightgown.
Reckless.
It's almost like it was meant to feel like a dream.
I think it is. I think it's meant to feel like she's disoriented. She's doing so much thinking. She's staring out, breaking the fourth wall, staring at the audience. The audience is staring at her. 12 fucking hours have passed and she's been in the same position. And you're just like, is this even real? Like, are we going to get a weird cut scene where she wakes up, right? And like none of this has happened. She feels like this whole thing feels so unreal to her. Mr. Darcy comes in. He's also disheveled. Like, she's disheveled. She's not properly dressed. He's disheveled. He's not properly dressed. His hair is kind of a mess. And he just decides to drop this letter off in the side of the room. He very briefly is kind of like, I'm not going to tell you again how much I love you because it's clear that you hate that. But I am going to explain myself because I feel like I have to. I feel like you don't really understand why I did anything I did. And he leaves.
He actually says, I'm not going to apologize for what I've done.
Respect.
But this is why I did it.
Respect. Yeah, and he just leaves the letter, turns around and leaves. Again, it's like she's kind of so disoriented that she turns around very quickly and he's gone. And the only indication she has that this was real at all is that the letter's there. The letter's real. So the filmmakers chose to take this opportunity. Like in the book, this letter's like several pages. It's very robust and detailed. Obviously, that's not like super fun to do in a movie. They have Mr. Darcy doing kind of like a brief voiceover as you see him horseback riding, leaving the estate. He's just done being at Rosings. The following morning, I think, Elizabeth is reading this letter. Charlotte comes into the room and Lizzie hides the letter behind her back. And Charlotte is like, Lizzie, are you okay? She's crying. She's crying and she looks like shit. She's like, Lizzie, are you okay? And she's like, I don't know. This is one of the last things I'll say for this part for the director's commentary. Joe Wright says, I think letters are really uncinematic, but poetically, it just seemed right that he should start speaking the letter, like kind of opening up the letter with what he verbally says to Lizzie and then disappear, and the rest of the letter continues in voiceover. And that she's lost him just when she realized she wanted him. So just when she started even entertaining the possibility that this guy could be interested in her, he is gone. And now she has to deal with how weird everything is. He goes on to say, I did shoot a close-up of Elizabeth at that moment where Charlotte discovers her and she's holding the letter. But I liked the ending on the letter, having the letter be what's captured in the frame. Sometimes to deny the audience the close-up that they want is a good thing because you're playing with their expectations. After this emotional turmoil, Lizzie returns home. She arrives back home on the same day or within the same few days that Jane arrives home from London. Nothing happened to Jane in London. Nothing fucking happened to Jane. She never found Bingley. She never was in touch with any of those people. She just went to stay with her aunt and uncle for fucking nothing, I guess. Lizzie is... We see her do something, I think, in this part of the movie that we don't ever really see her do, which is kind of keep secrets from Jane. Jane asks her, like, hey, how was Kent? That's the county that they were in. So she's like, how was Kent? You see her kind of, like, narrow her eyes a little bit, and she was like, no news.
Oh, nothing eventful happened.
That's a fucking lie. And now she's kind of observing the rest of her family through these new eyes where she's realizing, like, it's all of our fault that Jane isn't as happy as she could be. This moment between the two of them is interrupted because Kitty bursts into the sitting room just loudly sobbing. Lydia walks in behind her. What we learn in this scene is that Lydia has a close female friend, Mrs. Forster, who happens to be married to a man who's in the regiment, like a, you know, military man, militia man, whatever. And they have been stationed in like a different city far away from Hertfordshire. And so she invited Lydia to come stay with her for a visit. It's all you do. Pride and Prejudice, just people going to each other's houses. She invites Lydia to come stay with her. Kitty is older than Lydia and was not invited. And she's pissed because this sounds like a dope thing to do that Lydia's going to get to do and Kitty's not. She's so jealous and so angry. And Lydia is gloating. She is flaunting this thing in Kitty's face. Elizabeth and Jane hear about this trip. And Elizabeth goes to her father and she's like, don't let her go. What the fuck are you thinking? This bitch is insane. Not only is this bitch insane, but she's coming to it with the perspective of all of these new things I've learned about the way my family appears makes me even more nervous for her to leave and be around strangers and be pretty much unsupervised, like no real adults.
And she says, like, she's going to make our family look ridiculous.
Yes.
Something that you haven't heard her say any other time in relation to her family. Now you see her kind of worried about the impression that her younger sisters are making out in society.
Unfortunately, Mr. Bennet is like, whatever. Lydia's so fucking annoying. Get her the fuck out of my house. They want to deal with her? Great. I don't. And Lizzie's like, don't. Like, you're going to regret this. Don't fucking do this. And he's like, it's fine. It'll be fine. All of this is all happening at the same time. We love going to other people's houses. At the time that Lydia is preparing to go on this trip, Jane has returned from London. Lizzie has just returned from Kent, staying with Charlotte. Her aunt and uncle, on her mother's side, have also come to visit the girls, talk to everybody. They've delivered Jane. They're the aunt and uncle that live in London.
They're going off on another trip, and then they're inviting Elizabeth.
So they invite Lizzie to accompany them pretty much on a sightseeing trip. Like, they're vacationing. They're straight chilling. They're like, hey, do you want to go with us to some area called like the Peak District? I don't really know what that is in England. I could look it up. I think it's just kind of like a rugged, mountainous nature area. What the fuck else do you have to do, bitch? And Lizzie's like, nothing, I guess I'm gonna go. So she goes with them on this trip, and we get this very, very, very beautiful scene where she's standing on like the edge of a cliff with this incredible wind
beautiful.
And this amazing swell of the score and like the most perfect piano happening behind her. And you get this sense that Lizzie's like renewed by being on this trip. She's feeling better than she would have been feeling if she was just stuck at home with like her ridiculous fucking family. Because her aunt and uncle are way more chill than her family. Keira Knightley on the edge of a fucking cliff, on the edge of a goddamn mountain.
It's also a visual representation of her in a place where she has taken control of her life. However, she might be regretting that right now, but this is a person who's making decisions for herself. I think that she's reflected on what it means to have rejected someone like Darcy. But again, I think whether she regrets it or not, it speaks to her, the independence she feels even as a woman in this time, that she's made this choice to reject this man. And so it's kind of like this shot where she's alone on this cliff is maybe a representation of that.
She's like out on a limb.
I think after she was kind of given permission by her father to reject
Mr. Collins,
I think that she realizes like she has this power to control her life, like within her own choices.
It's local government.
Yeah.
She has the chance to pave the roads in her town. Maybe she doesn't have the chance to pass laws in the Senate, but she can pave some roads. This is kind of her grasping that independence. And also I think crossing this threshold into like adulthood in a way, because so much about how she views herself and her world has changed in such a short amount of time. And no one in her family even knows anything that happened with Mr. Darcy. She has been totally closed off about that, at least in the context of this movie. In the book, Jane is still her confidant, but not in the movie. And I think that was done, obviously, purposely. When they're traveling, they're supposed to go up to these like beautiful mountains and shit. So her aunt, her uncle's wife, is like, I'm from Derbyshire. I really want to go there. Do you mind if we go there, Lizzie? And Lizzie, not wanting to say, no, I don't want to go there, is like, sure, let's go.
Derbyshire. And then the uncle, like, he's like, yeah, isn't that where that rude guy's from? That rude Darcy guy?
Isn't that where that fucking asshole's from? And Lizzie's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And this is something, again, that we learn in the book. It's not made explicit in the movie. It turns out that her aunt is literally from the village outside of Pemberley. So outside of this insane estate, like, that's where her aunt grew up. So she's very fond of the area. She knows the house. She used to know the people that lived there. Obviously, she's not familiar with the younger Mr. Darcy, but she was familiar with the elder Mr. Darcy.
And she'd praise him.
Yes.
As to, like, what a gentleman he was and blah, blah, blah.
Right. Elizabeth is just swimming in discomfort. They go to Derbyshire. They're in this gorgeous forest. They're having a snack. I guess like a wheel on their carriage broke or something like that. And in the context of the movie specifically, they're talking about like, oh, we got to get the carriage fixed because this wheel broke. Are you cool with just hanging around Derbyshire? We can go see Pemberley. That house is supposed to be gorgeous. And Elizabeth's like,
Pemberley? Why would I want to visit Pemberley?
I don't want to go there. And her aunt's like, relax. Like, why are you so tight about going there? And she's just like, you know, the people, they have so much money. I'm so uncomfortable. Like, she just makes something up. And her aunt's like, you know, the owners of these estates, they're always traveling. Like, they're never home. So there's very little chance that we're going to run into him as we're touring the public parts of this like incredibly large house. Like, not a house, right? It's a mansion. He definitely won't be there. Like, relax. Don't even think about it. And Lizzie's like, oh, fine. She's super apprehensive.
Well, at the time, these large houses had public areas where the public can visit. And obviously it's not, you're not going into any living quarters, but you're seeing, you know, displays and things like that. And
galleries, art, sculptures. So I assume they're in like a rented carriage or something. They pull up to Pemberley, to the estate, to like walk around and go into the house. And Elizabeth just like fucking laughs to herself. You can tell that it's like she is incredulous. She is just like, someone owns this? Someone lives here? This guy proposed to me? Shit.
Well, it's criticized because in the book, when she sees the house is when she starts to express favor towards Mr. Darcy.
It's the first time she starts being kind. And it kind of makes her seem a little bit like a gold digger. But based on what we know about Elizabeth and like her morals and stuff, I think rather than being a gold digger, rather than liking the fact that Mr. Darcy is rich, I think because she sees how his home is run and how his estate is run and how well people speak of him, that starts to change her mind. She's like, wow, this house is beautiful. Whoever made the decisions here has really good taste. The grounds are beautiful. Whoever made the decisions here has really good taste. All of these people in this fucking town say that the Darcys are amazing. Like, was I so wrong? Am I crazy in like what I interpreted this person to be? So I think it's very easy to be like, she saw that money and she was like, I'm gonna get that. But I do think she sees the estate and how much she likes it as like an extension of him, like as a representation of him.
No, and then they get the tour by the staff.
Yeah, like this one woman in the staff.
Even she's praises like Mr. Darcy as a kid and like how sweet he was and how sweet he is to his sister and how like he's practically helped raise his sister after their dad passed away, and
pretty much like how much everyone loves him, how loyal the staff is, how kind he is. And Elizabeth's like, who the fuck is that?
Who are you talking about? Are we talking about the same guy?
Legit.
Because, you know, they're going through these beautiful sculpture room.
Mm-hmm.
I love when she comes across the bust that's done after Mr. Darcy, right? It's done to his likeness. And she kind of just stares. And the aunt is like, oh, he's kind of cute. Is this what he looks like in real life? And she's kind of forced to say, yeah, I guess he is real handsome.
This is what he looks like.
And then she stares. Now you understand she's been there for a while, because at this time, the tour has continued on without her.
Like, she has lost her tour because she just stood there watching Mr. Darcy's fucking sculpture. And to pull from the director's commentary again, in the book, this scene was in a portrait gallery. So she was looking at paintings of Georgiana, Mr. Darcy, his parents. I think one of the reasons that Joe Wright leaned into doing sculptures instead is because the house where they filmed this, called Chatsworth House, already has a sculpture gallery that's very notable and like well recognized or whatever. So taking things off of the walls and bringing them into the third dimension is like so much more dynamic and like satisfying. They obviously have this incredible bust of Mr. Darcy done that she focuses on. It's really like she's like looking at him because it is so 3D. Yeah. He kind of calls out in the sculpture gallery, and a lot of romantic sculptures or Greek revival, like Hellenistic type of sculptures, you know, it's a lot of nudes. It's a lot of like robust, muscular people. It's like war, but even when they're at war, they're nude. So Joe Wright comments, this is about sex, this place, that it's her discovering her sexuality, and also that she's not just admiring his wealth, she's admiring his culture and his appreciation of beauty, and that he has sensitivity, and that she loves him for that sensitivity. It's not being rich, it's about his choices using that wealth and what they mean about him.
Yeah.
And Joe Wright says it's the only time she wears anything that isn't a deep earthy color, apart from the Netherfield ball.
She's wearing like a cream colored dress.
Yep. A beautiful dress. She's wearing this gorgeous pinstripe.
I love the dress she wears here.
Yes, me too.
Maybe it's meant to show vulnerability.
Well, she's open.
Yeah, you see her in like in a different setting, almost like you said, where she has reflected upon herself. She's more open to kind of receiving these different perspectives of who he is. It's actually believed that Chatsworth House was visited by Jane Austen earlier in the 1800s, and that after she visited, like, she was so taken by the place that she modeled Pemberley after Chatsworth House. In this movie, they decided to take that detail and film at Chatsworth House as Pemberley, as Mr. Darcy's home. So I thought that was a great full circle moment for Jane Austen world.
That's so fucking cool.
Again, her dress goes so well with the surrounding of the house. It's like so bright. It's like a bright, light, and airy home, even though it's still in the Baroque style, similar to his aunt's home. You're still getting that sense of old money, but it's in a light way though. It's a much lighter version of that. I think that's supposed to make you understand, here's youth, here's modernization. I think also vulnerability a little bit, because I think they're both caught in a vulnerable moment in these next sequences. She loses her party because she's entranced by Mr. Darcy's sculpture, right? Looking into his eyes. If you think about it, it's probably the closest she's been able to really observe his face. without contempt, without being in an argument, obviously without it being awkward, right? They haven't been together long enough where they can really appreciate each other physically, although he's been clocking her, but not the other way around. And it's really an opportunity for her to like really look at his face without looking at his face, right? It's kind of like when you're looking at a picture of somebody you like, ooh, what that mouth do?
Jesus.
And again, like you said, with the surroundings, with all this sensuality expressed in these other sculptures, it's almost like a bit of an awakening for her. She continues to roam the house on her own. She starts to follow this music that she's hearing, like this piano playing. You come to realize she's like in the private quarters of the house. And she comes up to like this door. She looks through the door where this music's come from. And she sees that it's a young girl. And she's playing the piano. And right behind her walks Mr. Darcy. And she's like, oh, shit. And when she realizes that it's him, I think she maybe has a bit of a startle. And they look to the door. They make full eye contact. And she hauls ass. She just runs out.
Not going to be caught dead in there.
Like, what sense does that make? Like, now you're running. Now what does that look like?
They didn't see me. They didn't see me.
Hauls ass. Mr. Darcy catches up to her.
Yeah, because he's got legs like a gazelle.
This is the Darcy boots. I love the sound of the Darcy boots. And it's like these long strides. Catches up to her. And she just starts apologizing profusely. Now she's in the wrong. Like, now she's the one apologizing. It turns the tables a little bit. Like, she's in his territory. So there's a bit of that vulnerability too. And he's just kind of like happy that she happened to be there. Like, he's not asking questions. He's just like, are you having a good trip? I wasn't expecting to be here. I'm here. Well, now that you're here, can I walk you to where you're staying? And she's like, no. She's just like, cannot wait to get out of there. She's so embarrassed. And he's like trying to take advantage of the opportunity. Like, let me walk you. Well, can we have, can I join you? Or like, and she's like, no, I'm good. I'm leaving. I'm so sorry. And leaves. She gets to the hotel where they're staying at.
Because, of course, she walks.
Yeah, she decides to walk, obviously. She's got to walk it off. The time that it took her to walk back to the hotel, he's already been there. He's gone there, talked to her aunt and uncle, and has already invited them to dinner and invited them over to the house. And she pretty much arrives, and they're like, hey, Mr. Darcy was here, and he just invited us to go to his house tomorrow. He wants you to meet his sister.
And Elizabeth is like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me?
Seriously? And what did you say?
They're like, of course. This is so funny. Her aunt is a funny older lady. She's like, he wasn't at all how you guys made him seem. Like, you guys made him seem like he was so unpleasant and like so arrogant. He was like really, really nice. Lizzie's like fucking shaking in her boots. She's like, he was really nice. Really? And her aunt's like,
there's something interesting about his mouth when he speaks.
And she is clearly like starry-eyed over Mr. Darcy.
Like, Thea.
Chill.
Auntie.
Chill. You are married. My uncle's right there. She's like, he is handsome. And Lizzie's like, oh my God.
Mira, mujer de Dios.
¿Verdad? Avión. I also want to call back for a second, like, Lizzie, in the moment where she's peeping in on Georgiana as she's playing, she catches this interaction between Darcy and Georgiana where he's surprising Georgiana. Georgiana's playing piano beautifully. She's like basically a professional. He tiptoes up behind her, surprises her. Both of them are overjoyed to see each other, which is very, very cute. He picks her up and like spins her around. He's so happy to see her. And they're like laughing and it's so cute. And this is the first time in this entire movie that we have seen Mr. Darcy crack a full smile.
It's so cute.
A full face smile. They are so few and far between. We are more than halfway through the movie. The first time we see him crack a smile and he looks amazing. The sun is shining out of his face.
It's the next day and the Gardeners are over at Pemberley with Mr. Darcy, and Elizabeth walks in with her aunt and uncle. Mr. Darcy makes the introduction to his sister Georgiana. It's all very sweet because Georgiana's like Lydia's age.
She's 15, 16.
She's just super sweet and just excited to meet Elizabeth. She's obviously heard a lot about her, which shows that her and her brother are close. Also shows that Elizabeth is his love interest for sure, because he's told his younger sister about her. I think that After the proposal, he realized he needed to do better. And I think this is him trying to kind of redeem himself from this impression that she had of him. He's kind of like, I think I need to show her like who I am as a person, as opposed to this facade that he really had up while he was staying in Netherfield. Mm-hmm. We see a different side of him. Like, he's friendly, he's talking, he's smiling, and you're like, oh, you're cute. Like, he's got this cute smile, and he's like, Mr. Gardner, can I take you fishing? And Elizabeth, I'm going to make you play the pianoforte for you and my sister, have to do a duet. And they're having like this banter back and forth, and it's cute. It's kind of a breath of fresh air compared to the tension that they've had throughout the whole movie. Up until this point, now you see them kind of be lighthearted towards each other.
And Lizzie is nervous. She is properly like jittery. She's like talking fast. She's blushing. I think they're both almost being like too accommodating to each other. Like they're trying to be nice.
Okay, maybe trying too hard.
Yeah. And you see Darcy's sister, Georgiana, just watching them. And she's watching them with like this little smile on her face because she's like, they like each other. Like, this is cute.
It's like a cute little interaction.
They're like flirting so much. Again, Darcy has never smiled this much in the entire movie. So Elizabeth ends up playing piano with Georgiana. Georgiana's very sweet.
They don't show that in the movie, though.
They don't. A funny thing about the book is that when Elizabeth meets Wickham and Wickham tells her about this whole thing that happened with like Mr. Darcy, he's like, Georgiana Darcy sucks. Like, she's a snob and she's terrible. She's so bratty and she's so spoiled. Elizabeth is in the book carrying that in her mind. Like, all these other people say that his sister's really sweet, but Mr. Wickham, this person that I like, says that his sister's a jerk. She meets her in person and she's like as sweet as a button. Also in the book, quite shy, whereas in the movie, she's not as shy. In the book, she's shy. In the book, she's more reserved, but she's sweet. She's more childlike. And in the book, Elizabeth observes that she like, wow, she reminds me of my younger sisters. She's really just a girl. That breaks down even more all of the things that Wickham said about the Darcys, that they're not good people or whatever. Something that comes up in the letter that Mr. Darcy left Elizabeth when she was staying near Rosings Park or whatever. You know, one of the things that Elizabeth has accused him of is like being unfair to Wickham, ruining Wickham's life, taking away like his living, his money. Darcy's like, okay, bitch, this is what fucking happened. Wickham tried to seduce my sister. She was 15 years old. This was like a year ago. He tried to seduce her and get her to elope with him. Luckily, like, we stopped it in time. Like, he didn't compromise her virtue or whatever, because if they had run away together to elope and had only like had sex or whatever,
that ruins her.
They would have been forced to get married. It just genuinely would have ruined her reputation. And then if Wickham didn't marry her, she's shit out of luck. No one else is ever going to want to marry her after that.
And he also points out that when Wickham was made aware that even when they got married, there's a stipulation that you're not going to get this money. You're not going to own this. He jumped ship.
Yeah.
He was out. He disappeared.
Georgiana is pretty much an heiress, right? Like, she's meant to inherit a bunch of money from her parents. Like, the elder Darcys have passed away. She's going to inherit a bunch of money because they're in this position of privilege where even though she's a girl, she still has a significant inheritance. Kind of demonstrates like how much wealth they have. It's very obvious that Wickham was fortune hunting. That is obviously going to fill Darcy with fucking rage. And the fact that his sister came so close to this, basically like a catastrophe, something that would ruin her prospects for the future, ruin her life, he has more than enough reason to hate Wickham. Now we're going back to where we're at in the movie, which is when Elizabeth is at Pemberley. She's hanging out with Georgiana. You can't help but remember all of these things that you've learned about Georgiana throughout the movie, throughout the book, without necessarily even meeting her. You learn that she's incredible at the piano. You learn that she's 15, 16, like she's a girl, that she was almost like seduced by this very unscrupulous man because he wanted her money, that she's naive and needs a level of protection that luckily she was able to get from her brother. Knowing all of this now, this fully changes Elizabeth's perception of the Darcys and of Mr. Wickham and Wickham's role in whatever happened to Georgiana Darcy. Or didn't happen, rather, because luckily it didn't happen. They have a great day. Everyone has a great time. Darcy sees Elizabeth and her aunt and uncle back to the inn in this village outside of Pemberley called Lambton. They go back to the inn. They're all like chatting. It seems really, really fun. And one of the staff at the inn approaches Lizzie as soon as they walk in, and he's like, hey, there's a letter for you. Hands her the letter. And she goes, oh, it's from Jane. Amazing. I don't know if this was like common back then. They go off to like a more private room and wait for Elizabeth to read this letter. I'm not 100% sure like what that's about, but she goes off to this room to read this letter. Everyone's kind of waiting for her. Like Darcy could have left, but he doesn't. She comes out from reading the letter and she is inconsolable. Like she's sobbing. It's literally like a revolving door. Like she comes into the room, she's sobbing, she exits the room again. Her aunt, uncle, and Mr. Darcy are left absolutely just completely confused. They have no idea what's going on. She enters the room again 2 seconds later, still sobbing. And everyone's like, what the fuck is wrong? What's going on? And she's like, we have the most terrible news. Everything bad is happening. They're like, what do you mean? Lydia, Elizabeth's youngest sister, has run away during her trip with her close friend, Mrs. Forster. During that trip to visit her friend, she has run away and eloped with Mr. Wickham. And everyone is just fucking stunned. Mr. Darcy immediately springs into action. Unfortunately, he is familiar with the situation. He's pissed. He looks at her and he's like, I'm so sorry. If I had exposed Wickham, like if I had told people what a terrible person he was, maybe we could have avoided this. Maybe your sister wouldn't have gone off with him. And Elizabeth says, it's not your fault. If I had just told my sisters what I knew, if I had just been transparent and open with them, I could have kept this from happening. So they're both blaming themselves. And this is kind of when we start to observe just how similar like Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy are. Like they both are approaching the situation with like, fuck, I fucked this up. This is my fault. No, it's not. Like Lydia has a mind of her own. She's stupid and young, but she has a mind of her own. And Wickham absolutely has a mind of his own. Lydia doesn't have any money. He was definitely just getting with her to get with her. He wasn't trying to marry her. He wasn't trying to like take her herencia, like her inheritance. He just was looking for a good time, and Lydia was fucking there, and that's evident.
Yeah, literally just took advantage of her innocence.
Yeah.
And she's like a little flirt, like a little coqueta.
Yeah, she's a hoe.
Hot in the pants.
Ooh, hot in the pants.
I mean, hoe's a strong word. She's a teenager. She hasn't done it
yet. It implies she would have done anything. Also, there's nothing wrong with being a hoe.
I mean, she's... It's their hormone season.
Oh, man. Hormone season. That's what we're going to call puberty.
Season.
Puberty is hormone season.
She just wanted to be out there. I mean, and I definitely think that she definitely gave the impression like she's...
open for business.
She likes to be friendly with the boys. And at the time, like, that shit got you in trouble.
Absolutely. And not having enough self-control got you in trouble. Because it's not that people don't want to be making out with each other's faces. It's just that they know that they shouldn't be, or they believe that they cannot. She doesn't have that level of self-control yet.
They don't run away with the boy to do it and get caught.
And her fucking frontal lobe, not fully developed, not for another 10 years. She runs away with Wickham. They're freaking out. Mr. Darcy, has this whole kind of heart-to-heart with Elizabeth and is like, all right, well, this is really terrible and I'm sure you're already really uncomfortable. I'm leaving. I'm so sorry.
Right.
Leaves. Lizzie's uncle is like, well, fuck, we're going to have to cut this trip short. We got to go back to Longbourn, and then I've got to go to London to try and find out where the fuck Wickham and Lydia have gone. They go back to Longbourn. Lizzie is immediately bombarded by Jane and by her mother, and both of them are like, oh my God, we're so happy that you're here. Lizzie's mother is just like in bed fanning herself, sweating. She's like, I'm so nervous. Oh my God. Because she needs to make everything about herself. Everyone's angry, intense, right? They're like kind of on the edge waiting to find out more information. Mr. Bennet comes back home. So he's gone out ostensibly to search for Lydia and search for Wickham and make him answer for her, right? And force them to get married. He comes back empty-handed. No Lydia, no Wickham. The girls run up to him. They're like, do you have any news? What do you know? He has a letter from their uncle who has gone down to London. He says, Lydia and Wickham have been discovered
in a compromising position
somewhere in London. They're going to force them to get married as long as Mr. Bennet agrees to like a very negligible dowry. on Lydia's behalf, like a no real value of money.
Essentially a payment. Pay Wickham a certain amount a year to stay with Lydia.
Right. And if he just pays this very negligible amount, done deal, they're going to get married and it won't be as fucked up a situation anymore. And Mr. Bennet's like, fine, yeah, whatever. I don't give a shit. Like, I just have to fix this.
If that's what it takes.
He says kind of openly to the girls, your uncle, like my brother-in-law, must have been really generous. Like, he must have paid Wickham off. Nobody would marry Lydia for this amount of money. I'm going to do one direct quote because I love when he says this. His delivery is like so perfect. No man in his senses would marry Lydia for so slight a temptation as 100 a year. Brutal. Your own father says that about you?
Brutal.
My God.
This is your dad.
Woof. As soon as they go and announce this to their mother, that Lydia has married Wickham, it's like she's a zombie rising from the dead. She's literally like, oh, she's married? And like gets up.
God.
Tell the servants they'll have a bowl of punch. I need to do my hair and get dressed.
She is the most annoying in this part of the movie.
This is her worst showing. The way she reacts to Lydia getting married.
She's like so worried about her daughter and what's going on. And then she finds out that she was forced to be married to this guy that she ran away with. And now she's like proud that she's married. And oh my God, she's so excited. She can't wait. It's like.
She bought a fucking bumper sticker. My daughter eloped with Mr. Wickham. And she's putting that on the back of the fucking station wagon. She's so proud. So everybody around her is like pissed. Lizzie is like, don't you think this is fucking ridiculous? And her mom's like, it's amazing.
Right. Like, this is not a thing to be proud of.
Right. Elizabeth's like, this is fucking embarrassing. And the mom is like, we need to buy her new clothes and we need to do this and we need to do that.
Like, tell the neighbors.
Yeah.
Like,
and Lizzie's like, you want to tell the fucking neighbors, bitch? Are you kidding? We get past all of this. Now the recently married Wickhams, Lydia Wickham and George Wickham, have come to visit the family at Longbourn before Wickham moves on to his next regiment assignment, which thankfully is very far away from Longbourn, so they won't have to see them very much. They're visiting. They arrive. Lydia is insufferable. This girl is like, being a married woman is amazing. Lydia Wickham.
You want Lizzie to just punch her in the face.
You want violence.
Yes. Yes. You want her to get dragged down by lo moño.
Una pecosa. You want violence. Like the way Lydia's acting.
Like if this family was Dominican, like it would have been a brawl.
Dead. She wouldn't be alive.
It'd been a brawl.
I know you don't watch Parks and Rec. You should, because it's really funny.
Some of our viewers might watch Park and Rec, so maybe you can.
One more time?
Some of our viewers. Some of our listeners.
Some of our Park and Rec. Oh my God. Yeah, there's this character, I forget her name. She's played by Jenny Slate. Her father's played by Henry Wiggler. And she has done insane shit. I think she like started a fire or crashed a car or she's done something crazy. And she goes to her dad and she's like, I have never done anything wrong in my entire life. And her dad goes, I know this and I love you. And then just hands her money. And like, that's the comedy of their relationship. And that's how it feels with Lydia and her mother. It's like, I've never done anything wrong. And Mrs. Bennet is just like, I know this and I love you. It's such a ridiculous scene. And all of the girls that are not Lydia are pissed. They're just like, what the fuck? Like, they're acting, you know, a little cold towards her, a little cold towards Wickham, because they're just like, this is so stupid. I can't believe you've put us through this. And like, you guys don't fucking care. At one point, they're like sitting down for a meal. Mr. Bennet has not said a word. He hasn't talked to anybody. Mr. Bennet is fucking pissed. Lydia is just kind of babbling. You get the sense that Lydia chatters so much that people tune her out and like stop listening to her. Yes. And so she's just talking. It's like a stream of consciousness about their wedding. And she's like, I wanted to know if he was going to be married in his regiment coat. The day of the wedding, we couldn't even find a best man. And I thought Mr. Darcy would have to stand up with him, but luckily he didn't. And Elizabeth is immediately like, snaps her head. She's like, Mr. Darcy? What do you mean, Mr. Darcy? And Lydia's like, I was supposed to keep a secret. I swore I wouldn't tell. Lydia is a baby. She is 15 or 16 years old. She's like, oh, I told him I wouldn't tell. And Elizabeth's like, wouldn't tell what? And Lydia's like, he's the one who found us. Like, he paid all of these fees.
Yo, knowing the fucking fuckboy that we find out Wickham to be,
Oh my
no
God.
duda tú that he took her to the same fucking place.
That he tried to take Georgiana.
And that's how they fucking found his ass, because he's an idiot.
They find them in London. Like, ellos tan escondido, somewhere in London. Luckily, I guess Mr. Darcy's familiar enough with Wickham to know where the fuck he goes. Elizabeth's like, Mr. Darcy. And Lydia's like, shut up, Lizzie. Like, I wasn't supposed to tell. You're not even supposed to know. And you know what? Mr. Darcy's a lot nicer than you sometimes. Like, he doesn't think he's as self-important. He's not as much of an asshole as you can be. And Lizzie's just like, her head is fucking spinning. The meal is over. Lydia and Wickham are on their way out. Mrs. Bennet is crying. Lydia is pretending that she's a gangsta. She starts to cry, though.
I don't get that from Lydia at all.
Or maybe she's laughing. The sounds are the same.
She's laughing. She does not give a shit. She's out. No remorse.
Do not collect $200. Do not pass go.
She is a doofus.
Yeah, she's the fucking worst. And Wickham goes to like say something to Elizabeth, and she turns her head and just ices him out. Like, she will not interact with him at all.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of like, nah, you're right. I do deserve that. And
sure.
leaves. So they leave. They're gone.
I think the next shot after all this whole ordeal is like them just sitting around in the drawing room. Like, middle of the afternoon, I think. It almost looks like they're having a siesta.
They're just chilling.
Miss Bennet has like a plate of something and she's like dozing off. And then they get the news that they're getting company. And I think it's
Kitty,
who looks outside and says, oh my God, it's Mr. Bingley. And he's with his friend.
Like, she's like, it's Mr. Bingley. Oh, and he brought his dumb friend. And Elizabeth is like, what?
I love this scene because they're just scrambling. Like, look like you were doing something important.
It looks so fucking authentic.
Yes. It's like you just found out somebody showed up at your house and you have all of 35 seconds to get your shit together to make it look presentable.
Between them parking their car and making it to your front door, you better figure out how to build a new fucking house in there, okay? Like, you better put on some makeup. You better get dressed.
Hide the dirty dishes.
Put the clothes in the
sneakers
closet.
and the socks under the sofa.
Yes, 100%. That is the desperation that they feel. They are fucking scrambling. This shot is done so well. By the time that Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy are brought into the home and announced at the door of the drawing room, all of the women are like calm, collected together. Like,
buttoned up.
Totally buttoned up, totally figured out. They greet everybody. Everybody greets them. They're all standing. It's like very awkward. You can tell Mr. Bingley's trying to say something, and Mrs. Bennet just won't stop fucking talking.
Poor guy, no lo deja hablar.
Literally in the outline, I just wrote, Mrs. Bennet is batshit crazy.
I think he wants to try to ask for a moment with Jane.
Yes.
And she will not let him. She continues to pepper him with questions and
then doesn't give him a chance to answer them.
To the point where my guy's just like, all right, well, I'll go now. Because...
He's so flustered and so embarrassed that he literally backs out of the room and like runs away. And Mr. Darcy's like, good afternoon, and like leaves. And at one point during this interaction, Mr. Bingley mentions that he plans to stay in the village for like a few weeks. And Darcy says he plans to leave in a few days. And Lizzie pipes up and she's like, you're going to leave so soon? And you can see in Mr. Darcy's face that he's like, what? Why would you care?
Why would you care?
How long I stay or like when I'm leaving?
You know, Lizzie has already, at this point,
she's in it.
I think she's in it. And as many times as he struck out at the beginning, he's at this point, I think he's won him back, especially with what he did for Lydia, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
As Lizzie finds out that he literally went out of his way to find her sister, not only found her sister, but was the one that fronted the bill to entice Wickham to marry the sister. Mm-hmm. And was the one that put everything together for her sister to have a somewhat favorable outcome to this ordeal that she put herself in. Now she feels like she owes him.
I don't even know if it's owing. I think it's such a debt of gratitude. Like,
yes.
She's just so grateful and also impressed. She's so impressed that he's gone through all of this grief just to help her family. She sees Bingley, and that's like part 2. Part 1 is Lydia. Part 2 is him bringing Bingley back.
Part 1 is inviting them to meet his sister.
That's
and seeing
true.
Pemberley.
That's true. That's
seeing
true.
Pemberley, seeing him in his element, seeing him with his family being his sister, and like seeing how the staff is so fond of him. That's part 1. Part 2 is Lydia, and part 3 is bringing back Bingley. And I mean, at this point, you know, it's him bringing him back for Jane because of everything that went down because of him. He's the one that separated them.
Yeah. And I think this is also like an admission, not necessarily a fault, but an admission that he was wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I did what I thought was right, and I don't feel bad about that, but I can acknowledge that what I did was not the right thing to do.
Like, I misinterpreted the situation.
Exactly that. I would do it again because I love my friend and I would protect him, but I didn't have all the information.
Right. So, you know, they leave, and then you see Bingley like practicing with Darcy as to what he's going to say when he goes into the house. You see that they're practicing. He wants to get this right. He couldn't do. He's like, oh, this is not how it was supposed to go. This is how it was supposed to go. And he's kind of like practicing with Darcy, and Darcy's playing like the role of the mom, which I think is really endearing.
Also, a thing that I love is that when Bingley is rehearsing what he's going to say to Jane, that was all improvised. I just think that's cute. I love that.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that even more because Mr. Darcy or Matthew in this sense, like he does such a cute job of responding, like being the mom in Mr. Bingley's scenario. I think it's adorable. It like shows a different side to the guys, like a little, it's almost boyish.
It is. It's cute. Like, seeing them be uncertain is cute. Seeing Mr. Darcy interact with Mr. Bingley like that is cute.
It cuts back to the house where you see the girls kind of have a bit of an interaction. Jane and Lizzie kind of go back and forth, and she's like, Elizabeth is kind of saying like, oh my God, I think he's more in love with you than ever.
Yeah, like, did you see his face?
I think Jane's trying to be like, yeah, she's trying to play it cool. And Elizabeth like, yo, nah, this is it. And Jane even apologized like, oh, you know, I'm sorry he showed up with Mr. Darcy. And Elizabeth's like, nah, don't be sorry.
Like, no, it's okay.
You start seeing her soften up, but she's doing it now in front of Jane for the first time, and Jane's almost confused like, wait, what? And then Wickham shows up and does his famous proposal. Jane gives her famous answer, 1,000 times yes, to the answer of marrying Bingley. And then I think that here the family feels like so complete. The mom feels complete. Like this, it's almost like the next cut after Bingley proposes to Jane is everyone kind of settled in for the night, and almost like with a big weight off of everyone's shoulders. Like the mom's satisfied, the dad is satisfied, Jane is satisfied.
You think it's the end of the movie?
As far as the family knows, as far as the mom knows, as far as Jane knows, as far as the sisters know, this is the conclusion. But nobody knows about Mr. Darcy.
No one knows how much the shit between Elizabeth and Darcy is about to blow up.
Nobody knows that. And then right when you see everyone kind of in their content little bubble, like, oh, finally, like we've reached this point, Lady Catherine de Bourgh shows up in the middle of the night and literally practically storms into the house.
Oh my God.
To question Lizzie. And confuses the shit out of everyone.
And I'm like scrolling through the director's commentary here just to like get a little bit more insight. In the book, that interaction with Lady Catherine, I mean, it happens during the day. It's not so insane that it happens at fucking night. And it also doesn't immediately happen. I think it takes a few days or like a week or two for Lady Catherine to finally get into their house and like demand to meet with Elizabeth. There's this sense in the movie that you get of like urgency. Like it really crunches down at the end where like it's the same night Jane gets engaged to Bingley. The same night that Elizabeth has seen Mr. Darcy in person. And Catherine just shows up and is like, what the fuck is up? Huh?
What's going on?
And it's like, why are you here today? Like, that's so random. Like, what is this false sense of urgency? I guess it just makes you think, like, what has she heard?
Something's going on. She heard something, yeah.
She heard something. Who has talked to her about this? What's her information, right? Like, why is she demanding to speak to Elizabeth? And this conversation in the movie always really confused me, and I think the book clarified it a little bit, but it's still something that a concept I find confusing. She's basically like, I need you to fucking tell me if you're engaged to my nephew. Like, are you engaged to Mr. Darcy? Elizabeth is annoyed, but I think she's also embarrassed, because it would be truthful to say that they're not engaged, but Mr. Darcy proposed to her and she turned him down. So she's kind of toying with Lady Catherine, because she's like trying to hide how embarrassed she is, and also how like painful that line of questioning is. Did he ever propose to you? And she's like, you said it's impossible because I'm gross and poor. And she's like, stop playing with me. Are you engaged to him? And she's like, no, I'm not.
If you're here in my house questioning me, I am obviously not engaged to your fucking nephew.
She says it with this tone of melancholy of like, no, I'm not. You can tell that in her mind, it's like, but I wish I was.
In this questioning, she demands for her to say like that, you know, tell me you would not accept a proposal from him. And she can't say no.
She won't commit to denying him. That leaves Lady Catherine pissed. Like, she leaves the house steamed at God knows what time. 2 a.m? Who knows?
Yeah, I am always confused by this scene. Like,
yeah,
it's in the book too, though.
It's not at night in the book. It's during the day.
In the book, this scene takes place during the day. I mean, she's still flustered. It's still a frustrating exchange. But obviously, taking place during normal business hours, you've come to have a conversation with someone. The way they put it in the movie, where she shows up in the middle of the night while this family is literally in their night clothes, makes it seem so desperate. And maybe that's what they're trying to portray, like this desperation, like, I cannot have my nephew seen with the likes of you. I'm gonna stop this one way or the other. And she could not wait till morning. She needed to do it right there and then.
Yes.
Maybe that's the urgency they're trying to bring into the movie. I remember watching it and being like, what the fuck?
So there's an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. The last time Pride and Prejudice was made into a movie, like a feature film, was in the 40s, starring a bunch of actors who are almost middle-aged, and they're all supposed to be in their 20s. So that version, you and I watched it once, and it's fine. And during this part with Lady Catherine, the woman playing Lady Catherine in that version is like chummy and cool. Like, she's playing it as if she's like, hey girl, are you trying to marry my nephew?
It really is. And you almost get the impression that she's there on behalf of Darcy. You almost get the impression that she goes over there to find out, do a little digging and find out maybe if he can propose to her again. Like, you almost get that sense, like she's there on behalf of Darcy, because she's a bit like cheeky about it. And then there's this part even where Lady Catherine crosses paths with Darcy. And I'm talking about this movie in the 1940s, black and white.
Yep.
And she winks at him. And you're like, oh, okay.
She's in on it.
She's in on it, and she's doing it to like back him up. In the book, she feels contempt for Elizabeth and her family. There's definitely none of that.
She thinks Elizabeth and her family are gross.
I mean, it's almost like what Elizabeth says, like, oh, so I'm so gross that you're here in the middle of the night to confirm that your nephew hasn't proposed to me.
Sounds like you're threatened, bitch. It's giving fear.
Exactly. It's like, you're threatened. There's obviously something. Like, I can't be so gross that I'm threatening you. Definitely one of the parts of the movies that kind of left me with some questions.
This happens, and Elizabeth is like bereft. She is feeling so low about herself. Everybody's really confused because they don't know what the fuck is going on.
Well, now everybody's asking her, like, what the hell? Why is this lady showing up at our door? What is she asking about? What is she talking about?
What does she want to know? What do you need to tell her, this great, big, stately lady?
She storms up to her room.
She's like, leave me the fuck alone. Like, get out of my face. And everybody's like, what the hell is going on? So you see her tossing and turning. Jane is soundly asleep in the security that she will get married.
How does everyone go to sleep after that?
Right?
Like, that's it? Like, you just left her alone? Where? In what family?
Could not be me.
Would not be my family.
So everybody manages at some point somehow to go to bed. And Lizzie's tossing and turning. She hasn't slept a wink. She's like, fuck it. I'm just going to get up and troll around the grounds behind my house. She puts on like a dressing gown, just walks out of her house, and just, I guess, a way to clear her mind. She's just taking this long walk.
I think bringing it full circle, this is where the movie starts, is her coming back from a long walk in the morning at dawn.
And now again at dawn, instead of returning from this long walk, she's leaving for this long walk. A completely changed person than who she was at the beginning. Her mind is full of shit. She is thinking, just does not know what to do. In the distance, in dramatic fashion, who the fuck do we see? Mr. Darcy, baby.
Walking down with his sleep shirts and the hamburger meat and right here, the hamburger meat with his chest hair.
What the fuck? What the fuck? What? What?
You're so confused.
Hate this. I hate it. I'm not going to address that. Anyway, Mr. Darcy is looking like he's looking super disheveled. Like he's wearing his shirt isn't fully. He's not wearing his cravat. He's wearing one shirt.
Sexily disheveled.
Sexily disheveled. He hasn't slept a wink either. You can tell both of these people look like shit in that they have not slept.
In that he walks to her house.
Yeah, and that must have been 3 miles. That's an hour. That's an hour-long walk. So they come across each other in this fucking, like, gorgeous grassy field. Again, there's this sense of, like, dreaminess. Like, is this real?
The score's doing it.
Oh, the score is giving, serving, living. He keeps walking towards her. No, bitch. This shit is real. He gets close to her. I feel like she's, like, stunned. She's, like, shocked.
Yeah, and it's like, what are you doing here? I think before they even ask any questions, she's just like, I couldn't sleep. It's like the first exchange between them. I couldn't sleep. And he's like, yeah, me neither. And all he said was like, my aunt. And they're kind of like, yeah. This aunt probably left the Bennet's home and went to give her nephew shit.
And went straight to Netherfield and was like, tell me why this bitch will not commit to denying you if you propose to her. Have you fucking proposed to her? What the fuck is wrong with you?
Right.
Again, that's the part of the book, story, movie, I would say confuses me the most. Everything else I find easy to understand because a lot of it is about human interaction. But this play about like status and his aunt being so upset that she has to physically go see both of them and yell at them about it is weird to me. Anyway.
She's trying to control her controllables, right? Or her nephew.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, because her prospect was that her daughter marries Mr. Darcy and set her daughter up. This takes away that option for her. And I think that maybe that's why she's so upset. If this is true, then what is she going to do with her daughter that she's promised to Mr. Darcy ever since they were kids?
Even though there's no formal engagement, their family is kind of intended that they would be together. Even though they have no interest in each other, they're not close. Right. And this is something, it's like a non-issue. It's barely brought up in the movie. So you see Lady Catherine is acting out in this way because she's in the same predicament as Mrs. Bennet. What the fuck do I do with my daughter? So I guess in that way, you can tell that like these issues of like marriage and protection and femininity at this time, like it transcends class. Yeah, rich people have a much better opportunities and much better prospects, but this panic about what's going to happen to my kids is...
If I can't marry her off to the right person... Now what?
For everyone. Everyone's catching these hands. And these hands are society. So I guess that brings a little bit more humanity to Catherine de Bourgh if you're looking at it that way. But regardless, we're with Lizzie and Mr. Darcy.
He lets her know, like, you wouldn't commit to her that you wouldn't accept the proposal from me.
Right. He's basically telling her, like, you're not the type of person who would mess with me. You're not the type of person who would be dishonest just to hurt my feelings or be dishonest, period. Like, you're going to tell me how you feel. Like, you wouldn't trifle with me. My aunt's visit has taught me to hope, as I've scarcely allowed myself to hope before. Basically says, like,
let me know now if you still feel like you felt last year.
If you still hate my rotting guts, tell me now.
However... if your feelings have changed, I need to tell you that you have bewitched me body and soul.
And I love you. I love you.
And he can't get the words out. This is the sweet declaration that she needed in the middle of the movie, where he's telling her, this is how you've made me feel. And he can't contain this love that he has for her anymore. This is a beautiful moment.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. The scene is beautiful. He's just opened up his heart to her. And she just says, okay, your hands are cold.
Your hands are cold, bitch. Get over here.
And
Let
then,
me grab your
and
fucking
that's
hands.
it. To him, that's her acceptance. And I'm almost like, after all the shit that's happened, I wanted to see more from her. After all the shit he like went through for her, and obviously, yes, he was an asshole at the beginning. I think they made a conscious decision for him to be the one to declare in this way more loving way the way he felt about her. And she accepted in a very nonchalant manner, like, okay, yeah. And I think it was almost like about time. I feel like it was almost like she accepted with a like, finally you came back and asked me again. Maybe she had been thinking about that moment since the last time he proposed. It's surprising because throughout the movie, he's been the one that is always like, never has much to say.
Yeah.
Right? And she's the one that's always got a lot to say. And now we're at the moment again where it comes down to them two and she's got no words. She doesn't even reply.
She very quietly accepts his proposal, whatever that proposal may be, just that he doesn't want to be parted from her. He doesn't even explicitly say, like, marry me. She takes his hand. They incline their heads towards each other. They touch foreheads. And that's the scene, baby. Get to the scene in the director's commentary. According to him, it was a magical morning. They all got up at 3 a.m., went out and prepared for this shot in the dark, and waited for first light. So they had less than an hour to shoot this scene. And he says, I battle with myself over this scene because it's probably a bit over the top and over romantic and slushy. But if we haven't earned it by now, yeah, I know. If we haven't earned it by now, then we never will have. I've probably gone too far, but if Matthew hasn't earned this moment, who has? And he says, one of the makeup artists stood beside me while we were shooting this, and she whispered very quietly, I wish that was my life. Which is so dreamy. I mean, it is such a dreamy scene. There's just a field covered in fucking mist. You can barely see the grass for it. The sun delicately rising behind them. Oh, it's so, so gorgeous. Where are we going next? Well, we're back at Longbourn.
Well, he has to ask for permission.
Now Darcy has to ask for permission, which he does. After he asks for permission, Elizabeth walks into her father's office, and her father's like, bitch, are you crazy? What the fuck? I thought we all hated this guy. I thought he was such a fucking asshole. Are you insane wanting to get married to him? And she's like, no, because you don't know what the fuck has gone down. I haven't told any of you this shit. It like cuts away to the other women in the family watching Mr. Darcy, who is nervously pacing in front of their home. And they're like, Lizzie likes Mr. Darcy? Like, what? And everyone is so confused.
Confusion all around.
Everyone is confusion. We cut back in to Mr. Bennet's office where Lizzie has ostensibly just told him kind of a brief version of everything that has gone down with Mr. Darcy, Lydia, Jane. Mr. Bennet is like in tears, like he's teary-eyed, and he's like, I have to pay him back. He's paid out so much money. I have to give it back to him. And Lizzie's like, no, don't. He never would want you to do it. We're not even supposed to know that he did this. He's just a good person. Just let me marry him. Mr. Bennet's like, yeah, of course you can marry him. Like, why would I say no? And especially everything you've just told me. One of my favorite lines in this movie, it really hits for anybody who has father wounds. He says, like, again, through tears, like just the sweetest scene. He's like, I never could have parted with you for anyone less worthy. This person who has done so much work to like deserve you is the only type of person I would ever let you marry. And luckily, baby, he's got 10,000 pounds a year.
It's really like, again, such a great contrast to Mr. Collins. So with that line, he explains why he couldn't let her marry Mr. Collins, even if it was for, quote unquote, the betterment of their family.
The security.
Right? The security of their family. It needed to be somebody who fought for her and like truly deserved her.
And I mean, saw her. Didn't just say, I need to get married. It would be convenient if I married one of your daughters.
Right.
But was like for her. I'm in this shit for her. And that's unrealistic AF, but you know.
One of my favorite lines that Mr. Darcy delivers, that Matthew McFadden delivers so well, it's in the dawn scene where she's pretty much like, you know, I have so much to be grateful to you for after everything you've done. Mm-hmm. And he goes back and he's like, it was all for you.
Mm-hmm. And he says it so simply.
Yes, it's like the way he delivers that line. It's like, ah.
He's like, you must know. Of course you know.
It was all for you.
It was all for you.
No, his delivery throughout this whole movie is
fabulous.
Chef's kiss.
So good. It's why, honestly, like, I've listened to a handful of podcasts that talk about Pride and Prejudice, whether they're talking about the book or the miniseries or this particular movie. There's like a divide, right? Like, I would say people that are like 5 to 10 years older than us, but are into Jane Austen stuff, ride hard for the miniseries, the one that stars Colin Firth. Then people our age and younger ride hard for this movie.
No, I'm sorry. This movie's it for me.
This movie's it.
You know, and respect to this miniseries because they're very true to the book. And I love an adaptation that's true to the book. We all love that. But it's the artistry behind this film. Like cinematically, musically, I feel like you just get all the feels. All around, from the music, from the cinematography, the actors are phenomenal. There's so much more feeling. It's sensory. It's almost sensory, right? The visuals and the music. And I feel like it's all encompassing in what they're trying to portray. I think they do an amazing job. Yes, the miniseries is great. It's very true to the book. Colin Firth is awesome. But 2005 Pride and Prejudice is almost sexy. It's just beautiful to watch.
It's gorgeous. So the British version of this movie has a different ending than the American version. The British version ends right after Lizzie has this conversation with her father. She leaves the room, exits off camera, and whoop, the movie's over.
No.
I know.
No, I wouldn't be able to do it.
In the American version of this movie, she has this conversation with her father. It's very emotional. He gives his consent. She walks out of the room, and he kind of shouts after her, you know, if anyone else wants to ask for any of my other daughters, like, please feel free. Just come in here and, like, ask. Because I am emotional. I'm a puddle right now.
I'm quite at my leisure.
He's laughing. He has, like, a hand slightly covering his mouth. He's, like, so happy, like, so overjoyed. Like, this really couldn't have gone better for, like, Jane and Elizabeth. The music is so upbeat and like charming and optimistic. The next scene that we get, we are at Pemberley. It is nighttime. Darcy and Elizabeth are sitting like on top of a table, incredibly informally. They're both in like
night dress,
more intimate clothes. I mean, they're still covered fucking head to toe, but like intimate clothes, dressing gowns, like robes. And they're facing this like gorgeous like reflecting pool that's on the property of Pemberley. Again, nighttime, everything is lit with candles. It's like obscenely beautiful. Darcy is like standing up. Elizabeth is like caressing his leg. So this is already so much more intimate than almost anything we've seen in this entire movie. He sits down next to her and they're both sitting crisscross applesauce and it's cute as hell. They're joking with each other. They're joshing.
It's almost like a tease.
It's a tease. He calls her like my dear or something like that. And she's like, don't call me my dear. You know, that's what my dad calls my mom when he's mad at her. He's like, what am I supposed to call you, Mrs. Darcy? And she's like, no. You should really only call me Mrs. Darcy when you're like completely, fully, incandescently happy. It's very cheesy, this part. So he leans in to like kiss her. This is the first time you ever see them kiss. He says, well, how are you this evening, Mrs. Darcy? And then kisses her again. Mrs. Darcy.
Keeps saying it.
Says it like 3 or 4 times. At the end, they finally kiss on the mouth. We are blackout, credits,
and you're just like, oh.
And you leave this movie
so happy,
floating on a cloud.
Yeah, you feel satisfied. They got their happy ending, and you feel happy for Elizabeth. You feel happy for Darcy. You feel happy for Jane. You feel happy for Bingley. You're just like, oh, like it's completely, and it ends exactly how he says it, like fully and incandescently happy.
It's very sweet. Chef's kiss ending. Chef's kiss movie.
Completely satisfying.
1,000%.
You see the love, you see the back and forth and the drama, and you're able to see it all conclude and everyone's happy. That's what chick flicks are for. It's for you to be able to watch it, leave, and be like, oh, okay, that was nice. It's kind of like the movie you watch when you just need like a chill hug. Like it takes you in, it warms you up, and it leaves you just like nicely satisfied.
That's all you can say about it. It's the best. And that's why we love it.
That's why I love it so much.
We love it. I feel like we don't even have to do a real wrap up because we've talked about why we love it throughout the entire time. This is going to be a 6-hour long fucking episode.
But we finally got through the episode.
Woo woo. I mean, I love this. Is one of my. This is like watching this movie is like a bowl of soup. Like it is like the most comforting thing. It's an early autumn movie. It's an early spring movie.
Like a bowl of soup. I like that.
It's so comforting. And that's one of the reasons that, you know, it's so easy to keep going back to. By this point, this storyline has been done to death. Like it's been overwrought in so many different versions, loosely interpreted, and like an enemies to lovers and a misunderstandings trope and like whatever. But this one still hits. Even though we've seen Pride and Prejudice-ish versions of things long before we ever saw the movie, long before we ever read the book, this one still hits. And the book hits too.
I didn't reread it. I heard it through Audible again. The last time I read it was it could have been a decade ago. For me, it was a hard read. It definitely get through a lot quicker now. But the first time I tried to read that book, I had to try a couple times. And I think it was the language. You know, you're reading in like old classical English.
Yeah.
It took me a couple tries to get through the book the first time. Now, listening to it, a bit more mature, it's funny. And I didn't realize the satire at the time. I realize it more now as a grown adult, I guess. A lot of like how she makes fun of Mr. Collins. She makes fun of the sisters. And, you know, it's all done in a way where you're not realizing that she's making fun of it.
I love this movie. Let's do a quick scorecard and then try to do a wrap up at the end. Questions.
Okay.
Book or movie? Movie.
I definitely prefer this movie. I think this is one of the instances where I will forever prefer this movie, this one in particular, to the book.
Oh, yeah. Will my husband watch this with me?
He watched it once, and once was enough for him.
Ryan watched it with me once, to his credit, and he was asking a lot of questions, so I do think he would watch it again.
Again, this is one of those movies that I put on in the backgrounds all the time. It always surprises me when I turn around, like, and it'll be like on my iPad. Like, It's not really on the TV. It's just on my iPad in the kitchen while I'm washing dishes or making dinner or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I turn around and then my husband's just watching in the corner.
It's dad watching.
Literally doing the dad watch where his arms crossed. He's far enough where he's not involved, but close enough where he can still see and hear. He loves the proposal scene. He will never admit this.
That tracks.
He loves the proposal scene.
He loves chaos.
Will stop and watch every time.
He loves chaos. Okay. On a scale of 1 to ardently admire and love, how do you feel about this movie?
Ardently admire and love.
Big ardently admire and love. Just like infinity, ardently admire and love.
I burn for this movie.
I burn!
And it's because of Joe Wright's direction.
Friends, you have reached the end of our 2-part series on Pride and Prejudice. Thank you so much for listening. If you've been with us for this long, it's been a journey. And hopefully you stay tuned for many more. Happy listening. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, please leave a review anywhere you get your podcasts. Come and find us on Instagram at sis.flix.podcast. Shoot us an email at cisflixpodcast@gmail.com and let us know what you think, if you have suggestions or movie requests for us to cover in the future.
And that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Cisflix episode 1.
Woo
Thanks,
woo.
everyone.
Thank you.